guards, the master of horse, the blacksmith. Jon said. But they are all loyal to House Stark. Sansa said. Baelish would have had them all killed. And our brothers would be dead as well, Robb, Jon, Bran, even little Rickon. So no one could question that Jane was a Stark. Arya realized. It goes deeper than that. If Baelish planned to sell her as a Stark, who would he sell her to? Most likely, one of our bannermen. But our sworn houses, the Karstarks, the Umbers, the Marndalis, the Glovers and the Mormonts, have pledged their oaths to father many times. Sansa said. Traitors always claim to be loyal. What if the Iron Throne promised Winterfell as a reward for betrayal? If the North fought the Westerlands in a pitched battle, Robb would win. But if the Lannisters could bribe and corrupt our bannermen, then the outcome would be very different. When we executed Lord Bolton, he said others would break faith with House Stark. You can hardly trust Roose Bolton's words. Arya said. No, but we would be fools to ignore them. Before I killed Varys, he claimed that he could tell me of Tywin's plans. Is Baelish working with Tywin? Or did Baelish have plans against the Starks that he did not share with the Lannisters? Lord Tywin might be plotting with others against us. Baelish always had kind words for me. Sansa said. So did Joffrey until he chopped off Ned Stark's head. So did the Queen when she asked you to write a letter to Robb declaring father a traitor, Jon said. Sansa Stark burst into tears. I didn't know, Jon. I didn't know. Jon cut off her apology. Now you do. Baelish is a liar. His lie to Catelyn Stark about Tyrion Lannister began the war. The Hound saw his betrayal of Ned Stark in the throne room. Actions prove who someone is, words just show what they pretend to be. What are we going to do? Arya said. We have no ravens and Robb is on the move. But we know now why father died. He trusted too easily and valued honor too much. That cost him his head. Mercy and honor are wasted on men like Tywin Lannister and Petyr Baelish. I wish I slit Littlefinger's throat in the September. Arya said to her sister's shock. He deserves a worse death than that. Jon replied. He deserves to die screaming. The docks at Seaguard reminded Robb of White Harbor, clean and well ordered with cobbled streets. The houses were smaller and made of wood, not stone, and there was no great ring fort, buzzing with scorpions and spitfires to defend the harbor. The smells and sounds of brew houses and fish market greeted them on their walk to the ships. They passed by the war galleys and longships, making directly for the cogs. Lord Mallister had sent runners ahead, and the anxious captains waited by their merchant boats. Unlike warships named after great nobles or to strike fear in enemies, the cogs had unassuming modest titles, like the Merry Midwife, the Horn of Plenty, and the Sea Strider. At least 24 fat-bellied ships rested at the wharves, sturdy sea-going traders as long as any Iron-born longship and wider at the beam. The high sides would make them difficult to board in naval battle. 2 Stark guards plunked down a heavy chest full of gold and silver, only a small fraction of ransom from the God's Eye. The captains, from ports ranging from Old Town to faraway Volantis, stared at the shining coins with great curiosity. I want to hire your ships and crew for the fight against Euron Greyjoy and the Ironborn. Robb announced. A short hairy man with bushy whiskers and beard dyed green snorted. My thanks, Lord Stark, for paying us instead of merely taking our ships, but the crows I will not fear cogs. My lord, they say you are unbeaten in the field, but this is the sea. Casso Mogat may be too blunt, but when have wolves ever done well in water? A Pentoshi man said. There are wolves that swim the coasts of Bear Island. They hunt seals, whale carcasses, and salmon. Daisy Mormont said. But not Kraken, my lady, a big captain said. The Greyjoys are rather proud. They will not expect any challenge from fat-bellied cogs. And that's where they will be wrong. Jerry, Robb said. The tall blonde boy came forward and put down a sheet of parchment. Sketched on the bow of a cog was a tall multi-deck platform. This is a forecastle, my lords. Archers can hide here and rain down arrows on the longships below. The half-Ibonese captain stared. It might work, but it would unbalance the ship. It would be too heavy in the bow and lean forward. Right, but that is why we will build an aft castle. Behind the mast and above the transom, we can erect an even larger platform. Because we have more space, it will be wide and broad, and a final wall against the ion-borne ship. Even after they have boarded the deck, our men would still be higher and attack from above. Jerry said. But the taller you build, the harder it is to sail. The more weight on the front and back, the easier it might be to capsize in a storm, an SOZ captain said. That is true, sir. But there is one last piece of the puzzle. Maester Snow drew this. With reverence, Jerry took out a sheet of worn vellum. Sketched on the mainmast of a sailing ship was a basket-like top, tall enough to reach a man's chest. It was a lofty perch, a wooden barrel covered in canvas, between the tops of the lower mast and the shrouds of the topmast. What is that thing? The big broad captain asked. A crow's nest. A fighting top for the cog where the best archers can be placed. In the center, it will help balance the weight of the forecastle and the aft castle. Jerry said. A crow's nest to shoot out the crow's eye. The ion-borne carry shields on the sides of their ships. That won't matter against our archers firing from high up. When they board, we will throw them back into the sea. Rob said. Lord Stark, these designs are quite novel. But the longships are already faster than cogs. We will be slower still with this extra weight. The short green-bearded man said. You won't need to sail. I plan to take a galley out at night, and in the morning, race back to the shore. The ion-borne will be eager to claim the ship as a prize. The cogs will be lashed together, and anchored near the harbor. The men on the cogs will hide until they come close. And then when they board, we will shower them with missiles. Arrows, bolts, javelins. And I will give men spears to kill the squids as they climb the freeboard and decks. Rob said. We will need help from your sailors so we can build castles and crow's nests on the ships in a few days. Jerry said. Everyone will help. The North expects every man will do his duty. Rob said. They would need everyone. Carpenters, bosuns and quartermasters on the ships. Smiths and apprentices and fletchers on shore. Trees of ash and cedar would be chopped down, and forges would produce arrow and spear heads. Even the women and children were enlisted in gathering goose feathers, splitting logs into dowels, preparing thread and linen, and making knocks out of horn and bone. The ion-borne preyed on the weak and helpless. They would find a very different welcome at Seaguard. The wind died down as they sailed up the river to the God's Eye. Arya had traveled along the blue-green ribbon of water when she fled with the recruits of the Night's Watch from King's Landing. Then, Yoren had hoped to take refuge at Harrenhal, not knowing that Lady Shellowent had already yielded the castle to the Lannisters. Yoren died at some empty holdfast, killed by Lork and his men, after he ordered Arya and Gendry to escape. Life had returned to the town on the southern shore of the lake. Boats bobbed on the long pier and docks and lamps shone at the large September near the Lord's Tower house. Arya was not certain but she thought she saw an earth and timber hole to their right. Lord Snow. The ship is becalmed. There is an inn nearby and even holdfasts whose knights would be pleased to host us, the captain said. Jon shook his head. No, we must hurry to Rob's side. He will be pleased to see Sansa and Arya again. The Mandaeally man nodded, and walked back to the mast. Arya sat down. The old Black Tom sniffed at her and then returned to feeding on the mackerel in her brother's hand. Thank you, Jon. She had no desire to relive the memories of her flight. I want to see Rob too. Father always said. The lone wolf died but the pack survives. She nuzzled into her brother. Do you believe that? We are stronger together than apart. But words are only words. A pack of wolves can be killed. Father said the Starks have endured for thousands of years. Arya said. The past is not the future. And nothing is certain in life. A bittersweet smile broke on Jon's face. Well, that is not entirely true. Winter is coming. Her brother's eyes stared down into the cold steel waters of the God's Eye. Do you think we will be safe? Once we return north? Jon shook his head again. There is no safety in this world. There are only moments of less danger. We have killed a few monsters but there are others, lurking around. King's Landing breeds villains, like flies on shit. Do you regret it, Jon? Not burning down the September or the throne room? We might have been able to kill both Joffrey and Tywine. We might also have killed the Tyrells and the Martells. That would be hard to explain to Owen and Elrys. Should we have killed everyone? It would be a great stain on our honor. It would have won the war. It might save the lives of our men, and protect our brothers and sister. Arya said. Jon sighed. I do not know. I thought of staying in King's Landing to kill Tywine with wildfire. I would likely have been captured or killed, but what is the value of a single life? You and Sansa would be safe, Robb would be king of the North, and the Iron Throne would have no hold on the Starks. A few lives lost, thousands more spared. Arya smacked him hard in the arm. Don't be stupid. You won't die. And you won't give up. Sacrificing yourself sounds like one of Sansa's stories about two fatheads in love. You know what they say about you and Robb. Dire wolves cannot be beaten in battle. Jon smiled and tousled her hair fondly. Anyone can lose. But we will continue to fight. From the sea captains, Robb had learned more than he ever expected about winds, waves, boats, and sails. The waters of the Bight and the Narrow Sea were rough only in autumn, but Iron Man's Bay was never calm. Strong winds could drive waves 20 feet high, a danger to both cogs and longships. The last 5 days had seen cold and dreary weather with sharp winds blowing northwest, forcing the squids to take shelter in coves along the Cape of Eagles. The Ironborn were excellent sailors but not eager to fight ship to ship. The Pentoshi trader had explained the tactics quite well. The men of the Iron Isles preferred to board and fight, so they could ransom the crew and take the ship as a prize. Longships were too narrow to carry back plunder and thralls. Unlike the dromons and war galleys of the Royal Fleet, the Iron Fleet carried no rams. In the cold and choppy waters of the northern seas, ramming an enemy vessel would have resulted in sinking both attacker and defender. Black sails bearing the Golden Kraken had been spotted 50 miles away on the coast. The Northern Army was ready for battle. Hundreds and hundreds of barrels bristling with arrows had been loaded onto the cogs. Forecastles, aftcastles, and crow's nests had been erected on the cogs. All that remained was the final orders for battle. The galley will sail soon. All soldiers will board the ships tonight, so that you will be ready for battle tomorrow. Robb said to the captains and commanders. The Mallisters would accompany Robb on the Silver Eagle, the larger of their war galleys. Lord Stark, should we wear our full armor on board? Sir Michael Redfort asked. The Vale Knights were entirely uncomfortable with fighting on water. For tomorrow, we have 3 types of forces. The greatest number will be archers, hidden in the castles and other platforms. The second will be the foot, and yes, you will wear plate and mail, and shields, and drive any who board the ships. The third will be the marines. They will be lightly armored and carry javelins, spears and knives. The knights and men-at-arms will form a wall to stop any charges or arrows, and the marines can flank and harass the enemy. We will send them back to their fucking drowned god. The Great Jon said. Only if we surprise them. The Ironborn ships are quicker than ours. Plus, in the morning, there will be a sea breeze blowing toward shore. The longships will be upwind from our cogs. We want their entire fleet to engage our ships. We will not reveal our numbers until they come close and cannot retreat. Our archers should fire at the last moment. Robb said. We will have other men in the harbor, my lord. If they should swim for shore, they will not escape our axes and swords. Jason Mallister said. Lord Stark, I fear you underestimate the Crow's Eye. Casso Mogat said. Robb quieted the northern commanders with a glance. What do you mean, Captain? I would welcome your thoughts. It is a good plan, and the Ironborn have not seen ships or tactics like these. But Euron Greyjoy is feared for a reason. He has pillaged, raped, and murdered all over the world. The Crow's Eye is a dangerous man, hard to predict, and even harder to kill. He consorts with warlocks and sorcerers. The deck of the Silence is soaked red with blood, the short Ebenezer said. More likely to be paint. Euron Crow's Eye has not raped Seaguard. And so long as I am here, he will not do so. Robb answered. The Silver Eagle sailed out from Seaguard into a clear night, propelled by a steady land breeze. The dire wolves stared at the stars and a full moon before lying down for a well-deserved rest. All 3 had grown larger than a pony, but were still 1 or 2 hands shy of a full-grown destrier. Rob rubbed his dire wolf's smoke-grey fur behind the ears, but Grey Wind merely opened his eyes briefly and then went back to his bondmates. Ghost and Nymeria had already fallen asleep, huddled together for warmth and comfort. Rob chuckled. He had told his men to do the same, to rest up before the battle. Watchers had been posted at the bow, the stern, and the crow's nest, and the Malisters assured him the longships had anchored at least half a day away. The land breeze blew west at night, and the Greyjoys were unlikely to row against the wind in darkness. Rob closed his eyes. He woke up to a sharp rap on the door. A young Malister page bore the captain's message: sails had been sighted at last on the horizon. With the help of Oliver, he quickly dressed and went out into the cool morning air. His guard had already assembled: Michael Redfort, Dacy Mormont, Robar Royce, Small Janumber, and other Valiman and Northern lords. Jerry and the other Wintertown boys readied the 2 catapults on the deck. You can't see the sails from the deck, but Wyl took a spyglass to the crow's nest. He says he saw the squids. Hollis Mollin chattered. The young guard in question had already climbed down the rope ladder. Lord Stark, I saw black sails on many ships, with lines of gold. Those would be the Greyjoy ships. Their sigil was a golden kraken on a black field, although in truth it appeared to Rob a yellow blob with squiggles. Can we tell which ship is the Silence? The hull of the Silence is red, not black or brown like the other ships. But we are too far away to see. The Malister captain said. And are the longships moving? No, my lord. This early in the morning, the winds have died down. The Ironborn will wait to sail until the breeze begins to blow from the sea. The captain said. Get us closer, and then get ready to run for the shore. Rob ordered. The Malister men were skilled sailors and navigators. The galley looped about in a semicircle, hiding in the morning fog, until it slipped close to the Ironborn ships, but with the prows facing east. The Silver Eagle had only used the sails, choosing to preserve any rowing for a battle. Men readied their weapons but had yet to don armor or string bows. The Silence was an ugly, ominous ship. The hull and deck were blood red and the sails darker than the other Greyjoy ships. The Kraken sigil was leaner and somehow hungrier, like the tentacles ravenous for prey. A motley crew of rogues manned the decks, some hairy and squat, others dark as pitch. On the prow, a maiden of black iron hung with outstretched thin arms, and unblinking mother-of-pearl eyes. The crow's eye had sewn her mouth shut. The Silence was completely quiet. Rob wondered why anyone would rip out the tongues of men to command a mute crew. How did Euron sail on the seas with no voice but his own? The crow's eye was a madman and the Ironborn fools to follow him. The catapults launched the stones through the air. The first splashed short but the second smashed into the figurehead, jarring loose the eyes. A third stone crashed into the white-painted hair and the head fell to the side. A merciful death, Rob thought. An angry black-haired man with a dark beard and a patch over his left eye appeared on deck. The right eye was blue as a robin's egg, deeper than the pale blue lips. The crow's eye screamed orders. The Malister galley sailed past, the eagle on purple sigil taunting the squids. The chase was on. The pursuit took hours. The Silver Eagle ran downwind, heading straight for the shore, powered by a strong wind. The Iron Fleet followed, like a pack of dogs that had scented a fox. But I am no fox, Rob thought. The galley easily matched the longships cutting through the waves. The crow's eye may use oars soon, Jason Malister said as they sighted the walls of Seaguard. For now, the ships used only sails. No captain wanted to exhaust his crew too early. Why are his lips blue? Rob asked. He drinks the shade of the evening which makes him half mad. They say Euron cavorts with warlocks and has visions of vile abominations, half man, half fish, that rule the deepest and darkest corners of the ocean. Half mad. Far more than half. Prepare for battle. Rob and his guard donned their armor, and archers strung their bows. The direwolves stayed hidden and silent. They sailed past fat-bellied merchant ships, seemingly exposed vessels bobbing on the outer edges of the harbor. But the cogs were lashed together from stern to prow, and formed two lines, so that missiles could be shot from the sides without fear of hitting each other. As the Silver Eagle passed, archers, infantry and marines began to emerge on the new platforms. The smaller Malister galley, the Defiance, met them in the harbour with 2 other cogs, the Murnaham and the Merry Midwife. The Silver Eagle turned so the port side faced the oncoming longships. The Ironborn, eager for plunder and blood, surged forward, swarming like crazed bees, raining volleys of spears and arrows as they prepared to board and take their prizes. The Seaguard ships held their fire and waited. The Silence stayed back, content to allow a dozen ships rush past toward the galleys. A longship with a grey unmarked sail was in the lead, and its captain, a tall man with white hair and a hideous scar across lips and jaw, swore at his crew to row harder. The Silver Eagle waited until the boat was nearly upon them, and the 2 catapults fired, heavy stones smashing into the high-arched prow of the longship. Then the Northmen fired from all 3 sides. Arrows whistled into the air from the 2 lines even as the Silver Eagle, the Defiance, the Merry Midwife and the Murnaham sent a deadly barrage directly into the advancing ships. Without shields, scores of oarsmen sprouted arrows, and the decks of the longships began to bleed red. The foam drinker slowed, but men on the Greyjoy ship tossed grappling hooks with sturdy hooks while others hurled spears to offer cover. The Ironborn attempted to climb over, but Rob's guard formed a wall on the foredeck, spears in both hands, the points aimed out over the edge of the Silver Eagle's sides. The forest of spears and plate armor protected them from arrows. The Ironborn captain climbed onto the prow, trying to jump over the rail onto the deck. Even the high end of the prow barely reached the elevated deck of the forecastle. The white-haired man, fenced in by Michael Redfort and Roland Wainwood's spears, made an awkward leap, only to be greeted by grey wind. The dire wolf ripped his right arm off at the shoulder before savaging the already scarred face. Ghost and Nymeria defended the stern of the boat, allowing the lightly armored marines to gut man with javelins as they crossed. And above them all, a storm of arrows rained from above, piercing the eyes, neck, and heads of the Ironborn. More and more longships joined the battle, but all over the harbour, the same scene played out. The advantage of height in hand-to-hand battle was considerable. For missile fire, the North had the edge in height, cover, and thousands of arrows. Again and again, the Reavers clashed against heavily armored fighters only to be shot in the face or back, or stabbed in the legs and sides by the Marines. Slowly and surely, Rob's forces were winning, and the harbour began to fill with the bodies of the Ironborn, hurled or pushed back over the sides. Lord Stark, Sir Michael Redfort cried in alarm. After his spear had been caught in a dead man's belly, the Vale Knight shifted to sword and shield, fighting like a legendary falcon knight. On the deck of the Silence, a monstrous man with a shaved head and dusky skin hefted a shiny dark and twisted war horn with both hands. The man wore many tattoos, the most prominent a black bird of prey, talons dripping blood on his naked chest. The horn was enormous, as tall as a man, banded with red gold and Valyrian steel, and glowing with red glyphs. The cheeks of the tattooed man puffed and he blew. Arararae. The horn screamed, a wail of tortured pain and primal fury. The shriek went on, and Rob could hear nothing else. He wanted desperately to slam his hands to his ears, but he forced himself to keep his shield and sword. All about him, men cowered, both the Northmen and the Ironborn were stunned by the horrible sound. Arararae. Euron's mongrel blew the horn again, and the howl pounded into the Silver Eagle like a winter squall. The mast shivered and the sails heaved and bulged like a bloated belly. The deck of the forecastle quivered, and the crow's nest shook, pitching archers into the rope netting below. Reef the sail. The Mandaeally captain screamed as the galley began to list to the starboard side. No one could reach the mast, and even the most nimble sailors stumbled. The dire wolves took cover under the sides of the cog. Rob realized what that meant. Fall down! Fall down! He yelled to his men. The tattooed man blew one last blast, and the squall grew into a titanic storm. The screaming drowned out all sound, but Rob could see the terrible horn shimmer with a white fire, and the muscles in the hornblower's chest twitch and the bird tattoo convulse, as if it desperately needed to escape. The planks of the Silver Eagle cracked and the rafters holding up the aft and forecastle shattered. The archers on the tottering platforms fell along with wood, ropes and sail. The mast broke and the boom fell onto the deck. Behind him, Rob heard screams of fear and pain. He turned to see the famed walls of Seaguard tumbling down. At last, the shriek ended when the hornblower collapsed, mouth full of blood and lips blistered. Blood gushed from the mute's nose, lips, and even the chest. The bird of prey bled red. One of Euron's mongrels snatched away the horn before it could fall. No one gave a shit about the tattooed man. The crow's eye laughed, surveying the hell the devil horn had wrought. It was a strange boast. The Silver Eagle and the Defiance had suffered greatly, and the newly erected platforms on the Seaguard ships were broken. Gaps and fissures could be seen on hulls and huge rips on the sails, but the cogs had not sunk. The Ironborn were not so lucky. The iron ships in the wake of the horn blast were crippled, masts fallen, hull breached, keels broken. Besides dead bodies, the waters of Iron Man's Bay were littered with the prows of wrecked longships. Euron Greyjoy had damaged the Maester fleet. He had destroyed his own though, or at least the longships that engaged the galleys and cogs. Euron knew he would be defeated, Robb realized, so he protected his retreat by sacrificing his own. The fighting men struggled to recover from the blasts of the horn. The direwolves had no such trouble. After the third blast, Grey Wind, Ghost and Nymeria cleared the deck, killing the stunned reavers with teeth and fangs. The Stark sigils were covered in blood, but none of it was their own. Even a horn from hell could not stop a direwolf. "Lord Stark, what should we do?" Sir Michael said. He dispatched a wounded Ironborn with a sword thrust through the eye. "Sink the rest of the longships. Our ships are in no position to pursue," Robb said. The Silence departed west, leaving behind the carnage. The other ships were too crippled to follow. The water was thick with blood, corpses, and debris. Ironmen were clubbed or stabbed to death when they reached shore. Most simply drowned in their armor. The fish in Ironman's Bay would feast for weeks. The Silver Eagle limped back to the wharves, passing the barges and merchant boats tasked to return the Northern Army to shore. As they neared Seaguard, the extent of the damage was revealed. All three walls had crumbled. Last night when the Silver Eagle sailed out, a bright moon and stars shone on a dozen towers. None remained. Small folk, men too old to fight, women and children had taken refuge in the walled town. How many had died when Euron ordered the horn blown? How many had been trapped in the toppled towers? It was a ghastly thought, that they were helpless to protect the weak from Euron's wrath. The Silver Eagle had lost a mast, sails, the top, and most of the oars on the port side. Still the war galley fared better than most ships, and far better than Seaguard. The town was ruined. The docks survived but brewhouses and market stalls had not. Everywhere Robb could see signs of destruction and hear the sounds of mourning. The rivermen were stunned silent in shock. "Lord Maester, I am sorry that we could not help Seaguard more," Robb said. "My lord, you have nothing to be sorry for. It was Euron and his horn from hell. Had we fought at the walls, even more would have died. And the Ironborn might have overcome us and taken Seaguard." A sorrowful Jason Maester replied. "Where did he get such a thing?" Sir Michael asked. "I can tell you." A man wearing a lambswool tunic of green and black overmail was escorted by Willis. 24 Ironborn men stood uneasily, guarded by Wendell and Marndaily knights. "Who are you, sir? And why are you not in chains?" Robb asked. The Ironborn captain's face was handsome but ruddy, the product of life spent on boats. "Lord Stark, this man claims that he is opposed to Euron Greyjoy," Willis said. "The Crow's Eye is a kinslayer, a blackguard, and a far worse monster than the scum that man the Silence." "I support Asher, Balon's daughter," the man said, fingering the seven-pointed star pinning his sable cloak. "My name is Baelor Blacktide, Lord of Blacktide." "I knew your father," Jason said. "He was a good man fighting for a bad cause." "I do not fight for Euron. I am spying on him." Balon Greyjoy fell to his death from a bridge 2 moons ago. The next day, Euron returned to the Iron Isles. He claimed the Seastone Chair and the Iron Fleet. Baelor said. "So Euron murdered his brother to become king. But what of Balon's children?" Robb asked. "I am certain he did." At the moot, some captains supported Asher, others Theon. But Euron had a mute blow the dragon horn and declared that the Ironborn would conquer all of Westeros. And then the fools elected him the new Iron King. Baelor said. "Isn't Theon his father's heir?" Robb asked. "Theon has been away from the islands for 10 years. He knows as much about longships as you do. Asher would have made an excellent queen." Balon was mad, Aaron is madder, and Euron is the maddest of all. He will bring doom on the Iron Isles, and perhaps the Seven Kingdoms. Asha fled with Theon to escape being murdered by her uncle. Tell me more about this horn. Robb said. Euron claims he found the horn in Valyria, but Lord Harlaw believes he stole it from warlocks. The man who blew the horn at the King's Moot is dead, and his lungs were charred black. Euron says the horn can bind dragons to his will. Baelor said. Dragons? Robb asked. A madman who ripped out the tongues of his men would do far worse with a dragon. How could you elect a kinslayer as your king? Lord Stark, men are fools, and the Ironborn more foolish than most. But many of us would see Euron deposed. His brother, the Damfair, is High Priest of the Drowned God. He opposes Euron. So do Asha and Theon, and Lord Harlaw and several others. But everyone fears the Crow's Eye. He would not hesitate to kill us all. Baelor said. And the dragons? How will Euron find dragons? Robb said. After Seaguard, he plans to sail to Essos to marry Daenerys Targaryen and bring her and her dragons back to Westeros. Baelor said. Dragons do not answer to gods or men. Why would they listen to a kraken? Michael said. The horn. There is magic in the horn, and the Crow's Eye controls it. Baelor said. Robb was tallying the casualties when bells rang in the army camp. 1 in 10 of the Northmen had died on the ships. More were injured, and unable to fight. Most of the losses had come, not in the heat of battle, but from the dragon horn, when the fore and aft castle and the crow's nests had fallen down. It was no comfort that the Ironborn deaths were greater. Lord Stark. A large force of men from the north. 2 stone towers connected by a bridge. The Outrider said. Fucking phrase. The Great Jon spat. Where were they when we were fighting? The Freys are always late. They are famous for it. Patrek Malister said. Edmure would have been married only 3 or 4 days ago. Why are they here? Robb said. He walked out, guarded by Daisy, Patrek and the small Jon. He passed a tent where Talisa and the Wintertown boys were setting broken bones and treating wounds with wine and vinegar. That included small folk, who had fled the town with their children and their meager possessions, to seek shelter in the countryside. Lord Stark. Lame Lotharfrey rode at the head of the procession, wearing an absurd feathered hat over his fleshy face. Narrow piggish eyes swept over the army camp. He was accompanied by several knights wearing other sigils, 3 sprigs of mistletoe, a black pitchfork and a golden heron with a silver fish in its beak. I congratulate you on your great victory over the squids. You did not come south for that. Why are you here? Robb asked. With muddy roads, it would have taken the Freemen over a day to ride 50 miles. They must have left the twins even as the Silver Eagle sailed from Seaguard. My father prepared a great marriage feast for Edmure Tully. Alas, you could not attend. So Lord Walder wishes to bring you meat and drink, my lord. Victuals and dishes from the wedding. The Great Jon snorted. How? Your men are mounted on palfreys. Where are the wagons? Where are the cooks and the servants? They are coming south, my lord, but the wagons would take them too long to reach Seaguard. Our men have set up feast tents at 7 Streams, and dug fire pits and erected pavilions. Your mother and the other river lords wait to greet you there. Lothar said unctuously. 7 Streams, a village directly north of the Blue Fork, was half the distance to the twins. It was larger than Hagsmire, full of bogs and bad roads. After Seaguard, Robb had planned to follow the Blue Fork south to Fairmarket to seek news of Jon Snow and his sisters. Lord Stark, our forces are low on provisions. I had hoped to feast you at our castle, but after the Ironborn attack. Patrek Malister said. Seaguard was in no shape to host any meal. We have wine, my lord. Barrels of ale. Casks of mead. Ale. Cider. Everything you could wish to quench your thirst. Lothar said. Very well. My men will attend tomorrow. Robb said. He turned to dismiss the Freys and returned to the wounded. The cold rain did not stop the boom of activity. Robb spent the morning speaking to captains and watching the Mandaelis and Wintertown boys examine the damage done to the cogs. There was much talk of masts, keels, rudders, hulls, and other nautical terms. Rob listened, nodded, and authorized gold and silver to pay for repairs. Jerry noted the amounts of each ship on parchment while carpenters and mates oversaw sailors swarming on board hammering nails, bracing planks, and jury-rigging sails and beams with spare canvas and wood. Clever boys dove into the harbor to salvage parts from the longships. Rob posted lookouts on the Cape of Eagles to ensure that the crow's eye did not return. And over the last night, Northern soldiers with the help of the Malisters rescued innocent victims from the rubble. Seaguard had suffered a sharp blow from the crow's eye but would recover. Lord Carstark and the Great Yon had already gone to the feast with their men. The Glovers and the Flints followed, along with the mountain men. Some Northmen chose to stay near Seaguard but foremost, the Earl of Ale and Mead overcame any dislike of the phrase. The horses were saddled and Talisa left orders to oversee the wounded. Out of the Winter Town boys, only Jerry would attend. The boy had kept his nerve on the Silver Eagle, and was a great help to Rob at the docks. The Mondalis would serve as an escort along with the other members of his honor guard, Daisy Mormont, Eddard Carstark and the Smallgen. Only the direwolves were not eager to leave. Grey Wind growled and snapped, while Nymeria snarled and sulked. Finally, they began the ride to Seven Streams. The wolves were restless. Even Ghost bristled, his ears erect and the fur on his back raised. The trio of direwolves watched the men with narrowed eyes, bared teeth and pointed tails. One would take a place near Talisa while the others prowled and hunted far ahead. Once again, Rob wished that John was by his side. His brother could slip into the bond with Ghost with ease. Rob loved Grey Wind dearly but he was too busy with duties to the north and the war to explore the connection with the direwolf. Then he thought of Sansa's lady, who had been killed by his father. Had the gods cursed Ned Stark for that crime? They had travelled over an hour on the muddy road when a band of outriders came. A knight and his squire approached until Grey Wind howled. The palfrey skittered and the pony bucked, throwing the boy and his longbow onto the soft ground. Nymeria growled and the pony ran away, almost trampling the boy. The free knight raised his shield and spear, but at an angry cry from the Smallgen, held back. "That animal nearly killed my squire," the knight yelled. "That animal is a direwolf, sir. And if you attack a Stark wolf, you will lose more than your squire," Sir Michael Redfort said. The Vale Knight was fully armed and armored. "Enough," Rob said. "Why are you here? We are still many miles away from Seven Stream." At least 24 men rode behind the Free Knight. "Pardon, Lord Stark," another man with the sigil of the twins said. "Lothar asked us to make certain you reach the feast. Why would we not reach the village? This is the only road north," Daisy said. The Free Knight leered at the Mormonte. "There may be brigands and thieves lurking. Deserters and bandits like this brotherhood without banners. These are my father's lands, Blackwalder. And the Eagles need no help protecting our allies." Patrek Mallister said hotly. "Very well. We will ride ahead, to announce that you are coming." The Free Knight turned away, and led his companions north. The direwolves glared as they left. They made the rest of the trip in silence, with the only sound the rain beating down on their heads. Ghost and Nymeria had disappeared, although Rob did not doubt Grey Wind's littermates were around, if unseen. They heard the music coming over the hill, a jangling rattle of some bells, and badly played flutes and pipes. The obnoxious din sounded more like a dirge than a wedding. They passed the rise, and the camps appeared below them, next to the headwaters of the Blue Fork. 3 great feast tents stood open in the middle of the pavilion, surrounded by dozens of free tents and wagons loaded with ale and wine. In the feast tents, hundreds of men crowded the benches and made toasts before emptying their tankards. Rob could hear the Great Yon along with Umbermen belt out a bawdy song. The drinking must have been going on for hours, and still the wenches rushed about, filling up horns and mugs like their lives depended on it. Outside the tents, serving men turned huge joints of meat on spits above open fires. A welcoming party of Freys walked to greet them. Lame Lothar led the group, but there was also Sir Ryman and his 3 sons, including the odious Black Walder that had met them on the road. Half a dozen other sons of Lord Walder stood by, but Rob did not see Stevran, Pawin, or Oliver. Grey Wind stepped in front of Talisa, his teeth bared. "Lord Stark, welcome. Lothar began. I am afraid your wolf will have to stay outside. He will frighten the servants. The dire wolf in question snarled. Black Walder and Lothar stood their ground, but the other men wilted. Rob tried to calm his companion with a quiet word, but Grey Wind only shook the rain off, the beads of water landing on the phrase. Grey Wind belongs with me. He will be happier in the kennel with a leg of mutton. A free man said. The wolf growled, a rumble that Rob had heard only in battle. Rob stepped forward. Lead me to the feast. Free squires and pages rushed out to take their horses. Rob sat at the crowded high table. The phrase had wished to seat him between Ryman and Lothar, but Rob chose instead to save those seats for Lady Caitlin and Talisa. Lame Lothar said that the rains had delayed them, but his mother would arrive with the other rivermen. Sir Michael and Sir Roland stood watch, taking turns with Robin Flint and Donal Locke. His guard was forced to sit lower, mixed with Lord Walder's sons and grandsons. The food had yet to arrive, but the ale, mead and wine, flowed free and fast. The few platters of meat vanished as soon as the servers passed the tent flaps. The great Jon drank and sang and drank. His voice carried through the hall, even drowning out the terrible musicians who could barely carry a tune. Is this too loud for you, my lady? Rob shouted. If this is a northern wedding feast, I will not wish to get married. Talisa replied. Rob's eyebrows arched in faux outrage. But what about little Ned Stark? The heir to Winterfell must have a father and a mother. Our child will, and we do not know whether it is a boy or a girl. We could name her Lyra or Minissa after your grandmothers. Talisa said. We will be married at Winterfell, my lady. If the gods be good, Jon and my sisters will be there. And Bran and Rickon. Rob said. Their talk was interrupted by a tall blonde boy. Jerry rushed over. Something is wrong. I did not see any Tully men or any of the Riverlord sigils in the camp. The Pipers, the Vances, the Blackwoods, they are not here, my lord. Edmure would have sent Tully guards with Lady Caitlin. And as for the Riverlords, a few might have stayed at the Twins with their liege. But others, like Mark Piper and Cale Vance, would be eager to hear of any battle versus the Ironborn. Yesterday, Lothar had told him that his mother and the rivermen waited at Seven Streams. Go to the Carstarks, the Mondaelis and the Smallgen. Tell them to arm themselves. Rob said. At the feast, given the great heat and the cramped quarters, few wore mail. The exception was Sir Michael, who remained in plate armor. The young boy nodded, and slunk away. Lothar Free stood up, leaning on an ornate walking stick. We have a special dish for you, Lord Stark. The drums pounded as two serving men carried a weighty platter to the dais. Rob placed his hand on Talisa's knee with an assurance he did not feel. Lothar, where is my mother? Why is she not at the feast? Lady Stark won't be joining us. Lothar sneered. A free man uncovered the silver lid and revealed the head of a black wolf, freshly slaughtered, blood still dripping on the plate. The music stopped as the pipers, drummers and flute players threw away their instruments and pulled out crossbows. Grey Wind exploded into action, knocking over the table to form a crude bulwark. Still the table was too low, and only Michael Redfort was fully armed. Crossbow bolts hit Donal Locke and Sir Roland Waynwood in the chest, killing both men. Sir Michael stepped in front of Rob, and 3 quarrels stuck to the red castle on his shield. Northmen, we have been betrayed. Rob threw his tankard of wine into Ryman Frey's face, dodging the long axe that slammed into the table. Ryman was fat, slow and drunk, but there were a dozen others behind him. Below the high table, chaotic fighting had broken out. 5 free men tried to wrestle the great Jon down. The Smallgen ripped a table off its trestle and smashed it over the head of several free knights. Galbert Glover rose to his feet, only to be cracked over the back of the head. And through it all, the crossbows kept their deadly fire, killing Rob's guard. Owen Norrie died. Robin Flint. Morgan Liddell. They would not survive the crossbows. A white blur ran through the tent, jumped onto the tables, and landed amidst the false musicians. Ghost tore a man's arm off and then lunged at another, ripping the throat open. The white direwolf killed and killed and killed, and the crossbows fell silent for a moment. As free soldiers attacked Ghost, Nymeria appeared, and fell on their rear. The she-wolf feasted on necks and arms, her bite strong enough to crush the flesh under mail and leather. But more armored men entered the battle, carrying longbows and heavy axes. 3 knights protected the remaining crossbowmen. A kennel master released a pack of wolf-hounds. "Surrender, Lord Stark, and we may let you live." Lotharfrey spat. "What happened to my mother? She died trying to escape. We meant to capture her alive, but Sir Raymond killed her, as she ran to warn you. She almost made it to her horse. But the others are our prisoners, your uncle, Lucas Blackwood, Mark Piper, Limond Goodbrook, Cale Vance, the bastard of Bracken. We killed all the Tully guards though." Lothar chuckled. Robb grasped the situation quickly. Most of his men were in the tents feasting. The Freys had men outside, surrounding the tents, armed and armored. Besides the empty tankard, his only weapon was a knife for cutting meat. But he had a wolf. He slipped into Grey Wind's mind and felt a primal rage and a great fury. The first hound leaped over the table and Robb snapped Grey Wind's jaws about the dog's throat. The second wolf-hound circled about more warily, only to be swatted away by Sir Michael's shield. Grey Wind quickly tore the stunned beast apart. "You can't win, Stark." Black Walder killed a flint. Darin Hornwood fell. Mountain men died from crossbow bolts. Harryon and Eddard Karstark were hard-pressed, fighting back-to-back. The Great Jon was finally subdued when 8 more men piled on him. Grey Wind bit through a man's arm at the elbow. Robb attacked again and again, tearing arms and knees apart. It wasn't enough. "My lord." Robb blinked. Who was calling him? The tall blond boy appeared at his side. "My lord," Jerry said urgently. "I cut a hole through the canvas." Behind them, a mere 10 feet away, was an escape route. "Lord Stark. Go. I will cover your back. If I fall, take care of Maya," Sir Michael said. Robb hated to leave his men. But if he stayed here, they would all die. He took Talisa by the hand, and they ran, only to be hit by a volley of crossbow bolts. A quarrel sprouted in his shoulder and another whistled over his head. But a bolt punched through Talisa's back, the steel head protruding from her chest. The force turned her sideways and 2 other quarrels struck her in the belly. She moaned and fell dead, clutching her stomach. Robb froze in shock. His father was dead, his mother, his lover, and now his unborn babe. Rage consumed him, and he went deep into Grey Wind. The direwolf roared and charged. He evaded the knights to reach the crossbowmen. Robb killed 2 men before they could reload, but a bolt hit the direwolf, and then another and another. Grey Wind continued the attack, but the wounded wolf was too slow now, and could no longer dodge the stinging axes and swords. More crossbow bolts slammed into him, and everything began to fade for Robb. The last thing he heard before it turned black was the mournful cry of his packmates. The blond boy stood over the warm, yet unresponsive body. With the few surviving Valumen, Jerry half carried, half dragged Robb out of the tent, before hacking away the quarrel shaft. "Is he dead?" Sir Michael said. "No, he is alive, but not there." Jerry had seen those milky white eyes before at the Red Fork. But the Maester had returned to them. Robb Stark had not. Fighting raged in and out of the tents. Ghost and Nymeria guarded Robb, and Northmen fought with weapons, shields and armor taken from dead Freys. Many were captured, but a few leaders escaped. Michael put on the white surcoat and removed any trace of House Stark from the body. "Jerry, run for the Blue Fork. Find a boat and take Lord Stark to safety." Michael put the surcoat over his plate mail. "I will distract these traitors." "How will you find me?" Jerry asked as he wrapped his arms about Robb's shoulders. "I won't. But the wolves will. And they will help me kill the fucking Freys." Sir Michael raised his bloody sword. "For Robb. For Robb." Jerry ran south to the river. Author's notes. I always found the Mercilor to Dawn plot forced. The book argues that Tyrion is thinking 3 steps ahead. If KL falls, the Martells will try to put Mercilor on the throne. But Tyrion has seen Sansa's treatment. Can he be certain Mercilor won't suffer the same? I think Tyrion is being willfully blind. Tyrion trusts Doran. Ned trusts Robert. But that is not the end game. The singer is Simon Silvertongue. In the books, Tyrion kills him when Simon tries to blackmail him to sing at the royal wedding. He is Shay's pet, and it is an omen of her betrayal. Fried fish actually pops up quite a bit in Game of Thrones, but the sardines, peppers and bread comes from chapter 45 in Dance with Dragons, The Blind Girl. I like the Arya training chapters. In A Feast for Crows, Cersei orders new dromons after her father dies. And the flagship, Lord Tywine, has 800 oars, which is insane. In the real world, the largest war galley had 3 banks of rowers, and probably 170 oars. So 400 oars is nuts. 800 is beyond silly. Euron Crow's Eye is just as absurd as a 800 oar galley. Who would serve anyone who would mutilate them? How much gold justifies following a madman? GRM does have a great rogues gallery of psychotic villains, but Euron is way out there. And unfathomably lucky in Season 8. The actual Valyrian phrase is Zuldrizes Buzdryixos Dea. A dragon is not a slave. I disagree with the Dany storyline, but her attitude toward slavery is totally right. It was unfair that she never got credit for her good deeds. She was a shit ruler, but she was also a liberator. It is an odd thing that Jaime does not tell people about the wildfire. For one, if it went off, it could kill tens of thousands. That's what Aerys planned, and how Cersei killed most of the Reach and the Faith, and probably why King's Landing exploded in the bells. Of course he was 16 then, so that plays into it. But the entire I reveal my secrets only to Brian seems implausible. Tyrion's desire to make peace is predicated on the map. Westeros is much larger than the UK. The north tip of Scotland to the southern coast of England is 600 miles. KL to Winterfell is 1,650 miles, about the same as Moscow to Paris. So once the army returns north, it would be a massive effort to go south again, buying the Iron Throne years to recover. Tytos Lannister was known as the Toothless Lion, and his bannermen took advantage of his weakness. Tywine never forgot that childhood humiliation. Guests at Casterly Rock mocked Lord Tytos to his face, twisting the lion's tail. In the TV show, Charles Dance has the terrific scene where he guts a stag and tells Jaime only the family name matters. Then you realize that the king doesn't have the Lannister name. It reminds me of the Borgias. They were the first family in Italy for a decade, but their actions created immense enmity. As soon as Pope Julian II got elected, the Borgias were toast. There are 2 types of burgoo, the mulligan stew made in the American South and Midwest, but the original burgoo is oatmeal porridge cooked by sailors and pirates. It was served by the British Navy a couple days a week, and quite filling. I took a slight liberty of using it. A longship was 45 to 75 feet long and a width of 8 feet. A cog was 49 to 82 feet long but 16 to 26 feet wide, and could carry 200 tons. Even before cannons, cogs began to replace longships in warfare. The longship is great for surprise attacks, but the armed cog wins. The freeboard of a longship was 2 feet. A cog's freeboard might be 10 plus feet. Tough to board. Rob's tactics come from the Battle of Sluys. The French had galleys, shallow draft vessels propelled by banks of oars. Like longships, the galleys were highly maneuverable and better at raiding. In fact, in 1340, the French were better sailors than the English. The English did not have a purpose-built navy. Edward only had 3 warships. He requisitioned cogs and converted them by adding wooden castles at the bow and stern. That allowed the English longbow to crush the French crossbowmen. Edward III won the battle decisively. Historians disagree about the origin of the crow's nest. According to legend, Vikings would release a crow or raven to determine where land was in times of poor visibility. But it is hard to understand why they would do so from the top of a mast. William Scoresby is credited with inventing a crow's nest as a lookout on whalers in 1807. But basket-shaped structures were common by the 15th century. The English definitely had platforms to shoot arrows in 1340. Tops were used by Marines with rifles, muskets and small cannons into the 1800s. There are far fewer naval battles than land ones in the Middle Ages. But I am a big fan of the Vikings. They were excellent sailors, but refrained from ship-to-ship battles. They specialized in hit-and-run raids to gain loot and slaves. The few Viking naval battles were against other Vikings, and they would lash their boats together with shield walls in the front and archers in the back. The tactics are simple compared to a few hundred years later. Roger of Loria, the Admiral of Aragon, modern-day Catalonia, would have massacred the Vikings. The English word marine is only a few hundred years old. However, the idea of a specialized infantry that supports army and naval operations has been around for a long time. In their war against Carthage, the Romans fielded specialized naval infantry called mariners. Book Euron is bonkers. The Aaron Greyjoy preview in Winds of Winter is Ramsay Snow taken up a notch. Euron admits to killing 3 brothers and raping Aaron and another sibling as a child. There were many bad things in Season 8, but Euron the Invincible was very high on the list. And then somehow, the guy who killed a dragon and crushed multiple fleets was killed by Jaime, who 3 seasons ago, got his ass kicked by the Sand Snakes. The horn scene is taken from the King's Moot in Feast of Crows, Chapter 19. I am not sure why they didn't realize that Euron had Bolon killed. The hornblower does die. Bolon was mad, Aaron is madder, and Euron is the maddest of all. Those are Baelor Blacktide's words in the Feast of Crows. Baelor supports Asher at the Moot, and is killed soon after by Euron. I made the dragon horn AD&D horn of blasting. Given the 10-year wait for Winds of Winter, I have wondered about how the plot lines will merge. Clearly Dragonbinder is important. This is Chekhov's gun. A dragon is like a nuclear bomb. The horn is going to be used at a critical moment. The average castle is far smaller than commonly imagined. Plus a lot of the space is outer walls, inner walls, baileys and courtyards, i.e. they don't sleep people. There are exceptions. Malbec Castle is 5 square miles in area, and housed at 1.3 thousand fighters. Winterfell is described as several acres, so bigger than a New York City block or 4 football fields. For most castles, any decent-size army would have to camp outside. I always thought the Starks and Jon Snow should have trusted their wolves a lot more. Robb did, until Bran and Rickon were supposedly murdered. Then he was a dumbass. Just like Jon, who locked up Ghost because he snarled at men plotting his murder. And it is a travesty that we didn't see Ghost in King's Landing or Dragonstone. Dire wolves are awesome. I read the 4 chapters on the Red Wedding, to Catelyn, to Arya. In the first chapter, Grey Wind snarls at the phrase many times. There is one sequence that struck me as quite odd. Grey Wind is about to attack Blackwalder, when Catelyn spurs her horse and cuts in front of the dire wolf. There is no way any horse, no matter how well trained, would block Grey Wind. The Red Wedding is taken from the Black Dinner in 1440. James II was crowned King of Scotland at the age of 7. Clan Douglas had become so powerful that the king's advisors feared they would threaten his rule. So they had the 10-year-old king invite the 16-year-old Earl of Douglas and his younger brother to the royal castle. According to legend, the 3 boys were getting along until a servant brought out a black bull head still dripping blood on a serving platter. Earl Douglas and his brother were then beheaded. GRM cites the Black Dinner and the Glencoe Massacre, soldiers kill their hosts after 2 weeks, as his inspiration. A Death in the Family refers to the Batman arc where Robin is killed by the Joker and a bomb. It was written in the 80s, highly controversial but key to understanding Batman's world. To recap, Grey Wind is dead, Talisa is dead, Robb's child is dead, Catelyn Stark is dead, and Robb's consciousness warged into Grey Wind before death, so a lot of trauma. Chapter 34, Prisoner's Dilemma. Chapter text. Prisoner's Dilemma. At the sight of the curtain wall, Jerry paddled toward the reeds. Last night, he traded 10 silver stags for a coracle large enough for 2. The fisherman had thrown in a hand net and 3 thick woolen blankets. The round shell-like boat was weaved from willow rods with an outer layer of bullock hide, waterproofed with pitch. It had been a long night, watching for free patrols, guiding the coracle down the Blue Fork, and keeping Robb Stark alive. He had laid Robb down on the flat bottom and covered the Lord with all 3 blankets. Getting in and out of the little boat was the hardest part. So long as the weight was evenly distributed, the coracle was surprisingly stable and could float even in a few inches of water, making it well suited for the rills and brooks before the headwaters turned into the mighty Trident. He strapped the coracle to his back, and guiding Robb with his right arm, trudged up the hill to the ruins of Oldston. The overgrown and rocky road wound twice around before reaching the summit. Beneath the castle, The woods were thick, and the bushes heavy with nuts and fruits. Jerry knew which berries to pluck, and how to pound the sedge tubers and nuts into a soup. Jerry made camp on top of the hill, in the ruins of the old castle. He placed Rob against the stone sepulchre, half hidden in the high grass. He took an axe out, and chopped away several roots, and ripped up fern bushes to make an open piece of ground large enough to sleep on. He smoothed the earth and leaned the coracle at aslant against the tomb, blocking out the mid-morning sun. After he placed a folded blanket down, Jerry moved Rob into the shadows cast by the round boat, and then draped the 2 other blankets over the Lord of Winterfell. He built a fire, and forced Rob to drink from the waterskin. He could have gone further than Old Stones. The Blue Fork rushed southeast to Fairmarket, Ramsford, and then met the Green Fork north of Lord Harroway's town. Those were Tully lands, with river lords loyal to the Starks. But nobles of those houses had been captured at the Twins, and Robb Stark was too tempting and valuable a target. A highborn might trade him to the Freys for their lord or heir, a lowborn could simply sell the Lord of Winterfell for hundreds of gold dragons. Jerry would not risk it. He would simply wait. The boy knew the Maester would come north. Jerry had been at the Golden Tooth, the Red Fork and the God's Eye. He had seen Snow's uncanny connection with his dire wolf. The Maester would find Ghost again. And with 50 miles between here and Seven Streams, Ghost would find Robb. The dire wolf could cover that distance in a few hours. There was a great deal to do before the day ended. Chop wood for the fire. Carry water up the hill. Forage for nuts and berries. Catch trout with the net. And most importantly, build a better shelter. The walls offered some protection from wind, but with branches, leaves and mud, Jerry could shield them from rain and cold. He was still working when he heard the wolves. Jerry scrambled up the hill, and fed more wood into the fire. He grabbed a burning branch, and as the sun set, waited near the crude wooden lean-to. He heard twigs crack, a heavy panting, and growls. A dozen wolves surrounded him, gnashing their teeth as they circled him. Jerry stepped back carefully, keeping his back to the shelter. A giant grey wolf with a white underbelly approached, and the smaller animals went quiet. Nymeria stared at him with hostile dark golden eyes. Jerry stepped aside, holding the torch high to light the way. The great she-wolf trotted forward and nuzzled Robb, as if willing him to wake. Jerry tended the fire, and roasted rainbow trout on sticks. Soon after, he heard heavier footsteps and the whinny of horses. The small wolves slinked off, and a white dire wolf appeared, leading men on horses. There was nothing to fear. The man in front wore a white surcoat, encrusted with dried blood. "Sir Michael. Good to see you. Care for roast trout?" The knight gave a tired smile as he sat down. "Jerry, I am glad to see you. This is Sir Robar Royce. Sir Andrew Tollett. Sir Ben Coldwater. The fighting went the whole night and into the morning. The wolves led us a merry chase down the Blue Fork this afternoon. How is Lord Robb?" Sir Robar asked anxiously. Ghost and Nymeria had settled near the young wolf. "I have kept him warm and comfortable. He has not woken, but he is no worse than last night." The words gave the knights little comfort. "My father says the Starks are hard to kill," Sir Robar said hesitantly. "He is not dead though. Although I suppose if he never wakes, he can't give us any commands." "Pity, I want to kill more Freys," Tollett said. "How was the fighting, sirs?" Jerry asked. Michael shook his head somberly. "Half the Valiman who went to Seven Streams are dead. Sir Roland Waynwood. Sir Elbert Belmore. Sir Limon Linderley. The North fared even worse. The Freys planned a clever ambush. We are lucky the dire wolves killed the archers and crossbowmen. Otherwise, we would have all died," Robar said. "A few men escaped, small number, the Karstark sons. But the Great Yon was captured, Lord Karstark, Patrek Malister, and many others. And Lotharfrey boasted that Lady Stark was killed and Ed Muirtully taken prisoner at the Twins," Michael said. "They served us meat and drink, after the victory at Seaguard. The gods will curse House Free for breaking guest right," Robar said. Jerry found extra twigs and shared the skewers of hot trout. The knights finished quickly and took the horses down to the river to graze and drink. Jerry offered the roast fish to the wolves, but Ghost shook his head, and Nymeria had already fallen asleep. "Where do you think we should head?" "Raventree Hall is half a day's ride south. Or we can hail a skiff or a barge and head to Fairmarket to send word to the Blackfish. By now, all of the Riverlands will know of House Frey's betrayal," Michael said. "If the Freys offer to trade Edmure for Lord Stark, what would the Blackfish do?" Jerry replied. "Sir Brynden is a good man." Robar protested. "But he is a Tully. Family is before duty and honor in their words. And Edmure is his liege lord." "The Blackfish hates the Freys," Michael said. "But his first loyalty would be to his house. Lord Tytos has fought bravely as well, but 2 of his sons went to the twins, and are likely prisoners. Can we send a raven to Snow? We have no ravens here. And I do not know where the Maester is. But have no doubt, sirs. Jon Snow will come for us. And he will come for House Frey." He woke at dawn when the clouds turned bronze and gold over the God's Eye. The 5 cracked and lumped towers of Black Harren's Folly jutted into the sky, but it was still too dark to see Harren Town, the town dwarfed by the great castle. Jon dreamt of Winterfell last night, the courtyard in the shadow of the first keep, where he and Robb had trained together ever since they were big enough to walk. There, they had laughed and played away from any prying eyes, pretending not to be little boys but great heroes, Aemon the Dragon Knight or Cregan Stark. But he had been sent away to the Citadel, while Robb remained to guard the north. In the dream, his brother was a king of winter, wearing an open circlet of beaten bronze with 9 black iron spikes shaped as swords. But a storm of arrows and quarrels fell, and daggers rose and struck in the dark. In the fighting, Jon was too far away to reach his brother. The darkness took Robb past the broken tower, past the Lycoyard, and into the ironwood door of the crypts. Jon searched and searched in the dark, under the stern faces of stone Stark kings on stone thrones. He did not care about voices that muttered he was no Stark, but he could not find Robb. The light burnt out, and the tomb faded into black, leaving only a direwolf, grey and ghastly, spotted with blood, golden eyes shining sadly. He knew those eyes. "Bring me home. Bring me home," the wolf whispered. Grey Wind deserved to rest in the crypts of Winterfell with the other direwolves that had served the kings of winter. And then Jon woke up. Jon found Arya on the bow of the wolf wind. His sister turned, a trace of tears in her bloodshot eyes. Jon held her tightly, and her sobs were muffled in his chest. "What did you see in your dream?" "I saw crossbow bolts at a feast. I saw a direwolf die." "What does it mean, Jon?" He wanted badly to soothe her fears, but he would not lie to Arya. "Nothing good. Be strong, little sister. We will deal with whatever comes." The banner of the White Wolf fluttered as they rode to Harrenhal. At the main gate, so wide that 50 men could march abreast, an old lady met them. A few servants attended her, Maester Tothmuir, Lucan the armorer, and a few tired knights. The anxious look that Shellowent gave them spoke volumes. Lady Went's eyes widened when she saw Sansa Stark. "Lady Sansa. You are freed from King's Landing." Sansa curtsied. "I am, my lady. Thank you for your hospitality." Jon swung off his horse, and interrupted the greetings. He could see the fear, the blacksmith's burly arms trembled, Sir Waylon Woade stared down on the ground, and the Maester's fingers quivered. No one, least of all, Shellowent, could look him in the eyes. "Bad news does not improve in the waiting. Tell me what you already know." "Lord Snow. Your brother was betrayed by the Freys," Lady Went said. Jon ignored the gasps of shock. He kept his voice flat and emotionless. "How do you know?" "A raven from Seaguard. It came yesterday, my lord," the Maester said. "What else do you know?" Jon said. "We sent a raven to Riverrun. They confirmed that Lord Edmure was taken prisoner at his own wedding in the Twins. Your mother, Lady Stark, was likely killed," Tothmuir said. "Not my mother," Jon knew, but Catelyn Tully married Ned Stark and bore him 5 children. His siblings had lost both father and mother. He wondered if he had also lost a brother. He could feel his sister's pain like a knife in the heart. "Take us to the Solar. And bring me both letters." Jon walked past Lady Went, and Arya and Sansa followed. Wind blew through open cracks, and the slagged stone warped the stairs and walls of Kingspire Tower. Here, Balerion the Black Dread unleashed his true fury against Black Harrin, a cruel fate for a cruel king. Brian and Sander stood guard outside while Jon read the first letter. Lord Stark defeated Euron Greyjoy in Iron Man's Bay, and Lotharfrey claimed that Lord Walder wished to share the remains of Edmure's wedding banquet with the North at Seven Streams. At the feast, Freys attacked with axes and crossbows. Robb Stark was wounded, and is missing. Many others were captured or dead. Very few men returned to Seaguard. What about Mother? Arya asked. That is the other raven. The Freys ordered Riverrun to bend the knee. They took Lord Edmure prisoner, and killed Lady Catelyn when she tried to escape. The Blackfish believes that the Freys took many hostages at the wedding. Sansa broke down sobbing. It is all my fault. Don't you see? Joffrey ordered this as revenge for my escape from King's Landing. I am the reason that Mother is dead. Jon shook his head. After the God's Eye, the Freys wanted a marriage with Robb. When that failed, they agreed to a betrothal with Edmure. Either way, a wedding would occur at the Twins. Your rescue was only a faint glimmer, and unknown to Freys or Lannisters. We cannot say when the final orders were given, but the Freys planned this treachery for a long time. Roose Bolton said others would betray the North. He may have known about Lord Walder. If that was the case, why didn't the Freys betray us at the God's Eye? Arya said. They did, or at least 1,500 Freys left. Some Freys did serve loyally in the battle. Sir Stevron, Perwyn, and Oliver, and a few of the bastards, Sir Martin fought well. The Freys may be more cowardly about battle in the open field, or perhaps Lord Walder informed Ryman and Lothar of his treachery but not the others. Or Tywine had already promised Roose Bolton a reward but had yet to satisfy the Frizz price. But if I never went south, if I had never wanted to be queen, this would have not happened. We would all be still in Winterfell. Father would have not been imprisoned and beheaded. Sansa, the water has run downstream. We cannot force it back up. You did not order Ned Stark to become Hand of the King. You did not take Tyrion Lannister prisoner. You did not plan Edmure's wedding or the Free Feast. This is not a time to wail or weep. This is a time for judgment. We need to determine our next steps. Sansa stopped her tears. Do you think Robb is dead? I do not know. I saw Grey Wind die in a wolf dream. But Robb might have escaped. We should kill all the Freys. Arya blurted out. We have no time for anger. We need to find Robb first. We need to know who lived, who died, and who was taken prisoner. Our first duty is to the north and our men. We leave in a few hours for Harroway. There is a lot to do, ravens, prisoners, and gathering our remaining forces. What happens if Robb is dead? Arya asked. Then I am Lord of Winterfell. And the Twins will burn. You have cursed us all. There is no crime so foul as murder at a wedding. And to invite your allies to a feast after a battle, and slay them while they are drunk. The gods will not forget these crimes. The old woman thundered. The Tyrells had come out in force to the small council. Lady Olenna, the true power behind Highgarden, revealed her thorns, accusing Tywine Lannister of the treachery in the Riverlands. Ravens had flown fast and furious into King's Landing that morning. The free wedding had been a gross violation of guest right. But the traitor's feast was seen as the greater dishonor. At the Twins, Lord Walder had taken many highborn prisoners. But at Seven Streams, the free hosts butchered the northern army. The Iron Throne had nothing to do with this. This is a dispute between Walder Free and his liege lord. Tywine replied. That bald lie did not fool anyone. Would Walder Free have done this without your blessing? Olenna Tyrell replied. The Queen of Thorns was famous for her sharp tongue. Nor was she wrong, Tyrion thought. Walder Free was not a brave man. He would have required guarantees from the Iron Throne. And Walder was greedy. What promises had his father made? Will the Iron Throne strip House Free of their lands? How will you punish them for breaking guest right? Oberyn smiled at Lord Tywine's discomfort. Why does this matter? We should be glad that our enemies kill each other. Baelish said. The Tyrells and their retainers glared at Littlefinger. He has prisoners, Baelish, from every house in the Reach. Are you too stupid to realize that their lives are at risk? Olenna did not need to clarify who he was. Tyrion knew from experience how unpleasant Jon Snow's personal attention could be. And Podrick had seen an entire company of bloody mummers crucified at Harrenhal. What of Robb Stark? Do we know if he is alive or not? There are conflicting reports. The phrase paraded around a body with a direwolf head and nailed a crown on top. But there are others who say that the young wolf was badly injured but escaped when his direwolf was killed. Tywine said. One direwolf head. But the North had 3 at the Red Fork. And the White Wolf is alive. Varys said that if Robb Stark died, Snow was heir to Winterfell. Tyrion shuddered. What about our lords? We paid gold to ensure their safety. They are still prisoners. The wolves released our soldiers and knights but kept the High Lords. Sir Garland said. The Freys have taken prisoners as well, Edmure Tully, and many others from the north and the Riverlands. Lord Karstark, Lord Umber, a Mormont girl, the Maester heir, Willis Mandaeli. The north has lost thousands of men. House Stark has been crippled. The Rivermen will have to bend the knee to the Freys. What if Robb Stark and Jon Snow rally their forces and attack House Frey? Jaime asked. Tywine gave a scornful shrug. How? Who will fight for the Starks, the Blackfish? The Karstarks. Walder Frey only needs to threaten to hang their lords. The young wolves can defeat the Freys in the field. They have been outnumbered before and still won. Garland said. Walder Frey is no fool. He will not seek out battle. He will squat at the Twins, and keep his captives close. Even an army of 20,000 would need months to besiege the Twins. And Snow has neither the men nor the time. His brother is wounded. Even if he is the heir, a bastard will have trouble controlling the north. He may have to trade his prisoners to free the northern lords. And if his brother dies, he will need to secure his rule. Tywine said. So that was his father's plan. Tywine Lannister would trade northern hostages for his men. And if Snow beheaded a few Tyrell bannermen, all the better. The Freys would weaken the Reach, the Riverlands and the North simultaneously. The cost was honor and reputation, but when had his lord father ever cared about that? The Lannisters would slough off as much blame as possible to Walder Frey. It was clever, except, how many prisoners do the Freys have? 8 Northmen. A dozen heirs of the Riverlords and Edmure Tully. Tywine replied. Jon Snow doesn't give a shit about House Tully. He is not his brother, the Red Viper said. Snow has 50 squires alone at the Golden Tooth, and hundreds of knights at Riverrun. He captured more at the Red Fork, including many of our most powerful lords. And he has important hostages from almost every house in the Reach. The Freys do not have enough prisoners to trade. Tyrion said. The Freys took Lord Umber and Lord Karstark prisoner. Those 2 houses are the strongest bannermen for the Starks. Snow will need their support to rule the north. Tywine said. Will he? Small Jon Umber and the Karstark sons served in Robb Stark's battle guard. They may already be loyal to House Stark. Tyrion said. What if Snow doesn't care about Winterfell? What if he only wants revenge? Jaime said. Then you should expect your lords to lose their heads. Oberyn Martell smirked. The words hung over the small council meeting like a black cloud. His father had hatched a clever scheme. But like all conspiracies, it relied on his accomplices. Lord Tywine did not bother to sully his own hands. When Tyrion was young, the Septon at Casterly Rock declared, they that lie with dogs, shall rise with fleas. But the Freys were worse than dogs. They were rats, greedy, treacherous and disloyal. It was good that Lord Walder hid in his twin castles. Rats did not fare well against wolves in the wild. Owen Fossoe waited until Sir William Withers waved him through the cordon of Tyrell guards. Since the debacle of the Wildfire wedding, Lady Olenna spent a great deal of time away from the Maiden Vault, holding court at the Godswood, overlooking the Blackwater Rush. The reason was simple: among the elm, alder and cartonwood trees, there was no place for secret tunnels or spies. The 2 score guards in green flushed out any listeners. Had we been here that night, we might have seen snow sail away on the river, after burning the mountain alive. A young Tyrell cousin exclaimed. The harbor is 2 miles away. Olenna said. You would have seen a green dot in the distance. And why would anyone want to see a man burn to death? The mountain was more a monster than a man. Sir Garland said. He coughed loudly, and bowed to the noble ladies. The Queen of Thorns waved away Margary's companions, leaving only the 3 Tyrells in front of the great oak heart tree, covered with smokeberry vines and dark red flowers. Ah, young Owen. You have heard the dreadful news of the weasels and how they conspired with the lions. Olenna said. Bits and pieces, my lady. I was at the great September of Baelor today. The High Sparrow declared the phrase apostates and that anyone who aided them would be banished from the worship of the Seven. The Faith are furious about the violation of guest right and the massacre at the feast. Owen said. The Queen of Thorns shrugged. The Septons enjoy ranting and raving, but when has the Faith done anything meaningful? Not since the dance of the dragons led to their deaths. Sir, what do you think Snow will do? Lady Margary asked. Will he seek revenge for the betrayal at the feast? Most certainly. You heard Robb Stark's oath at Redgrass Field. Jon Snow is his heir. What heir will not avenge his brother? But will he kill his prisoners? Execute our lords? Margary asked. Owen scratched his head. Why would he do that? They had nothing to do with the Black Wedding or the Traitors' Feast. But the Lannisters did. Walder Free would not commit these crimes without the protection of the Iron Throne. And the Reach is in league with the Lions. Garland said. Perhaps you should question that alliance first. I do not know. Maester Snow is not the most predictable of men. Owen rubbed the large bruise on the back of his neck. But Jon is not hateful. He is not cruel. We paid him ransom for the squires, men-at-arms and knights. The lords were kept to assure our good behavior. We have done nothing wrong. But does Snow know that? He made many terrible threats after the God's Eye. What if he believes the Reach supported this betrayal? Olenna said. I doubt he is putting the blame on Mace Tyrell. Perhaps, you could write your friend a letter, so he will know that for certain. Margary said. Owen could do more than write a letter. He could invoke the personal favor, but it would be a great mistake to let the Tyrells know about that arrangement. And he doubted that Jon would murder the fathers and uncles of his friends at the Citadel. How could my raven reach him? I do not know where he is. We do. Our spy saw the Wolf Wind sailing to the north shore of the God's Eye. He must be headed to Harrenhal. Garland said. Owen shook his head no. Where is Robb Stark? No one knows, sir. It is a great mystery. Margary said. Find Robb and you will find Jon. He will not stay at Harrenhal long. He will be on the move. If Robb is dead, I wonder what he will do. But I do not think he will kill our men. I believe in Jon Snow. The north may be hard and cold, but he was raised with honor. Fresh straw had been added to the thatched roof in the stable, and a newly painted sign, 3 roads meeting at a river, hung over the door. The Crossroads Inn was packed with travellers, merchants, craftsmen, and septons, but the Heddles offered any rooms and garrets that House Stark required. That wasn't much. The soldiers camped outside, and the Northmen would sail as soon as Captain Marndaly found suitable ships. Young Willow Heddle made certain that the highborn were served ample food and drink, even the ones in chains. And there were many of those, over 3 dozen captive Reachmen trying to make small talk with her sister, the ever-gracious Lady Went, River Knights, and little Liman Diari with his maester and steward. Arya accepted a bowl of steaming beef stew, warm bread, and a crumbled cherry pie. Hot Pie's food was delicious. Lady Sansa, I hope your brother will not blame House Diari for these attacks. Liman said. Why would he, my lord? A puzzled Sansa said. Walder Free married 2 of his sons to Raymond Diari's sisters. Lord Liman has 7 free cousins. The Maester said. Don't be frightened, Liman. The Freys have marriages with almost every house in the Riverlands. Lord Free took my cousin Sria as his 5th wife, and my niece Winifred is married to one of his sons by a cricket hall. I have a free good nephew. Shella Went said. Did your nephew or Liman's cousins take part in the attack on Rob? Arya demanded. I do not know. Little Liman squeaked. If they did, I doubt Jon will show any mercy. She snapped to the embarrassed riverman. Arya stomped off before her sister could make any apologies. Outside the inn, soldiers sparred, checked their armor, and prepared for battles to come. Riders had been sent out from Harrenhal, ordering all Northmen that remained south of the Trident to Harroway. Arya saw Glover men, Carstarks, and Flint men. Sir Alyn, knighted after being wounded at the God's Eye, now served as the new captain of the Stark Guards, and took charge mustering the northern troops. The Lightning Lord did the same for the Rivermen. Several hundred men had reported to Harroway, and dozens more were coming every hour from Solpants, and the lands around the God's Eye. There were more soldiers further south and west patrolling the Gold Road and Stony September, but it would take days, perhaps weeks to march to the Trident. They didn't have days. The Freys had sent ravens to many castles, boasting of their prisoners and demanding that the Riverlords bend the knee. In response, Jon had sent his own ravens but not to the twins. Birds had flown to Riverrun, the Golden Tooth, Raventree Hall, Pink Maiden, Atranta, Wayfarer's Rest and Stonehenge. Jon wanted the prisoners held at those castles to be moved north. Lady Mormont would follow orders, but Arya was not certain if the other lords would comply. After all, their sons were being held along with Edmure Tully. 2 men grunted, as they carried a heavy iron anvil by the horns. Arya rolled her eyes. Gendry was bull-headed enough not to use a wheelbarrow, but the older man should have known better. She recognized Lucan, the burly armorer from Harrenhal. Chet rushed over with a flat cart on wooden wheels. The 2 men dropped the anvil on the dolly, and then bent over gasping to catch their breath. Gendry, what are you doing? Arya asked. Lucan answered. Lady Went asked us to bring an anvil on the boat. She hopes to stay in your brother's favor. But why? We have taken the castle for her already. Arya said. Lady Went cannot hold Harrenhal. She does not have enough men. Jon said, before giving instructions on where to place the tools. Chet took Lucan and Gendry away. So that's why she came with us north. Arya said. She will come with us on the Trident. Lord Liman should as well. Robb left half the army to recover from injuries, guard prisoners, and protect the Riverlands. We don't have the manpower to do that. Men died at Seaguard and even more at Seven Streams. All our men will head north. But if we retreat, the Lannisters will take back these lands. Arya said. Lady Went is welcome at Winterfell. Here she has less than 20 men, and many too old to fight. All her servants could fit in a single hall of a single tower of Harrenhal. She will lose her castle but keep her life. So will Lord Liman. If he dies, who would inherit Daeari? One of his free cousins. I hate the phrase. Do you think that was part of the bargain? That the Lannisters promised the Freys lands and titles? I am sure of it. Tywin Lannister must have been plotting after the Red Fork. He could not defeat Robb in the field, so he paid a toll to the Freys. It must have been high: castles, marriages, titles, lands. Lord Walder has 30 children, not including the bastards. And those children have begotten other children who hope to profit off this treachery. That will not happen. Traitors are more dangerous than enemies, and belong in the darkest, deepest circle of hell. The Lannisters set a delicious table with succulent meats, saffron rice with fresh vegetables, ripe fruit from the reach, and the finest wines from the arbor, Dawn and Lies. The company though was less tolerable. At least, Tyrion sat next to Jaime and far away from his monstrous nephew. Joffrey sat between Cersei and Tywin, who had once again claimed the title of Hand. That meant his lord father had the task of educating the brat in how to rule. Will the Freys send me Robb Stark's body? Joffrey asked eagerly. I doubt Robb Stark is dead. If the Freys had killed him, they would have more than a dead wolf pelt. But Lord Walder claims hostages from the great houses in the north and the Riverlands. Tywin said. Then have him send the hostages to King's Landing so I can put their heads on spikes. Sweeterling, they must be kept alive so their houses bend the knee. Cersei said. They will bend the knee anyway. Otherwise I will destroy their family and take their lands. No one can deny the king. Joffrey crowed. Yes, that worked so well with the Starks. Tyrion said. I will kill Robb Stark. Tell the Freys to catch him alive. I will chop his head off and serve it to you for dinner. Joffrey sneered. Thank you, your grace, but I prefer this leg of lamb or a rack of venison. Tyrion said. Even Lord Tywine cracked a faint smile at the jibe. Are there new candidates for the Kingsguard? Cersei said, in an obvious attempt to stop Joffrey from spoiling yet another meal. There are few knights worthy of the White Cloak in King's Landing. I will not have another Meryn Trant or Boros Blount. And we have another problem. Many Septons blame the Iron Throne for the attack on Robb Stark and Edmure Tully's wedding. And plenty of knights agree with the Septons. Men with honor claim the Kingsguard has none. Jaime said. Bah, they will forget their precious honor. In a few moons, no one in King's Landing will care about the Starks. Tywine said. What about a Kettle Black? Osmond has two brothers, Osfryd and Osney. Cersei said. And what value are hedge knights with no name to the Iron Throne? Tywine asked acidly. If I wished to sully the Kingsguard, I would have appointed a Free. Jaime banged his goblet hard on the table. Tyrion knew that under the proud sardonic facade, his brother cared a great deal about honor and had found none in the White Cloak. I will not have a Free as a brother-in-arms. I will kill him in a spa before the ceremony. The Freys are treacherous, deceitful cowards. They don't even have the guts to betray a man without breaking the sacred laws of guest right. Lord Tywine pursed his lips. Explain why it is more noble to kill 10,000 men in battle than a dozen at dinner. The price of peace was cheap by any measure. Except it wasn't a few men, father. Only a dozen captives were taken at Edmure Tully's wedding, so the guards and other guests, including Catelyn Stark, died. And at Seven Streams, there were thousands of soldiers. How many were butchered while they were drinking with a Free as a guest beneath their roof? This was a massacre, not a murder. Tyrion said. It was not their roof. It was 3 tents thrown up in some god-forsaken village. Tywine replied. A village in free lands. A feast where meat and drink was served. This stain will not wash out. What was the price? How much was Walder's toll for blackening his name? Tyrion said. The crown shall grant River unto Sir Aemon Free once the castle falls. Walder Free will be Lord Paramount of the Trident, and the Freys will be Liege Lord of the Riverlands. Lancel and Davin will have to marry free girls, Joy is to wed one of Walder's natural sons when she comes of age, and the Freys have asked for Arya Stark as a bride for Elmar, the youngest of Walder's sons. Tywine said. I thought Baelish was Lord Paramount of the Trident. Cersei said. He was stripped of the title after the loss of Sansa Stark. Tywine said. Tyrion chuckled as his father eyed him with great distaste. Lord Walder is as likely to rule the Trident as Moonboy is. The Freys will not hold the Riverlands. They are hated by everyone, small folk, highborn, Septons, and the wolves. The wolves are not dead. The Freys have prisoners that will ensure the good behavior of their bannermen. And captives from the north. Tywine said. So in their strongholds, guarded by a garrison, they might be safe. The Riverlords still believe in guest right. But when they venture outside, Walder Free's sons and grandsons will be killed, like the rats they are. Tyrion predicted. Tywine shrugged. Lord Free has many, many sons. Who cares if a few die? The strong Arbor Goldwine loosened Tyrion's tongue. He will need all of them. It will be much more than a few. He sat down on a tight bundle of kindling and canvas as the ship went around the bend. The captain apologized profusely, but Jon saw no reason why supplies should not be delivered along the Blue Fork, to the little villages in this burned-over stretch. After the destruction wreaked by the Lannisters, these forgotten settlements, Donalwood, Fieldstone and Lambswold, were slowly beginning to gain life. The riverboat carried wood, hemp and stone, materials that would help the small folk rebuild. A bell rang out at a ravaged wooden September on top of a hill. The leaded glass windows had been stolen, the carvings of the 7 on the wide doors defaced, and the vegetable garden turned into an empty patch of dirt. Cowled apostles in dun and brown robes tended half a dozen cows and a flock of sheep. Men walked by the riverside, some carrying boughs, others scavenged armor and crude weapons. They hailed the ship, and cheered boisterously at the sight of Thoros the Red Priest and the Lightning Lord. "Who are those idiots?" Sander Clegane said. "The Brotherhood without banners, sworn to protect those in need." Thoros said. "Brothers without banners. More like bandits without masters. I have never seen a sorrier bunch of outlaws." The Hound sneered. "We are knights of the Hollow Hill, pledged to the Seven Kingdoms." "Are you all knights?" Sangza asked Thoros. "Any knight can make a knight. I have laid my sword on many shoulders. Those who would defend the realms can join our fellowship." Beric said. "Don't listen to this one. Dying has addled his brains. This bunch would sell you to the Queen for some silver, and then sob into their cups when you are tortured and raped. Just like any knight that serves the Iron Throne." "At least we didn't burn the Riverlands," one of the Dondarrion's men muttered. "I didn't either, you dumb cunt. I was in King's Landing during the war, while you were hiding in your Hollow Hill. I don't pretend to protect the weak, and fail like you." Clegane. "Brian." The raven descended onto John's shoulder. "We will be at Fairmarket soon. There is a large party of warriors waiting for us." "Are they friends or foes?" Sangza asked. "They are not Freys. But who knows who we can trust? Secure the prisoners and ready your weapons," John said. The sailors tied the boat to the remaining post of the wooden bridge, washed away by the surging Blue Fork. Fairmarket was a village with a modest tower house. Men wearing sigils of ravens on scarlet surrounding a dead white weirwood tree stood at the west shore, and their leader, in bright yellow armor and a splendid raven-feathered cloak, approached. John nodded and Lord Blackwood was allowed on the ship. "Lord Snow, I received your letter. Here are your prisoners, Brax, Banefort and Istran knights." "My thanks, Lord Titos. What news do you have from the twins or Seaguard?" John said. "Two of my sons went to the Tully wedding. Lucas was murdered, trying to defend Lady Stark. And Ben, Edmure's squire, was captured. Kinship counts for no more than guest right at the twins. Lame Lothar was the eldest son of Alyssa Blackwood, Walder Frey's fourth wife, and yet he conspired to kill one of my sons and capture another." "You are certain Lothar planned these crimes?" "He wrote to me and demanded that my Bethany be betrothed to one of Lord Walder's grandsons, else they would return Ben in pieces. Ben is only 12 and Bethany is a sweet girl of 8. She is her mother's favorite and brings joy to my home." "What will you do, Lord Titos? Why do you have 24 knights with you?" John asked. "I am not the only riverman riding north, my lord. We are all greatly wroth. Lord Piper, the Ridgers, Lord Norbert Vance. We lost more than our sons. The knights who went to the twins were nephews, and cousins. And now, their bodies float down the Green Fork. But what will you do? Will you fight the Freys? They hold your son, and your liege lord. If my son were freed, I would be happy to lead my swords and spears against the Freys. We all would. But with our sons in the castle." Lord Titos' eyes revealed his desperation. "We have heard the tale of the wildfire wedding. You freed your sister from the clutches of the imp. Can you do the same at the twins?" "It is not possible." A hard fierce voice carried over the water. His two sons, Daikon and Samwell, cringed as many eyes on the ship turned to them. "No one can do that." The other reachman groaned. Lord Tarley spoke out of turn. Baylor Hightower said. "He does not mean to intrude upon your grief." John met the stare of the proud Marcher Lord. A loss of a hand had not humbled Randil Tarley. "No, let him continue." "Why is it impossible?" "I know castles, bastard. I have studied their strengths and weaknesses. When I was a knight, I traveled around West Eos to see fortresses. Storm's End. The Eyrie. Casterly Rock. You cannot take the twins easily." Randil said. "The twins are no great castle." Titos retorted. "Each castle is normal, a castle wall, an outer bailey, a barbican and portcullis. But what makes it strong is that there are two castles. An attack on one will alert the other. And unless Walder Free is an utter dolt, he will divide the prisoners between both castles. He can use the stone bridge to bring supplies and men to any point, or even spirit captives away. And that bridge is protected by a high tower in the middle that controls the river. Tali said. Lord Tytos sagged, hope fading from his narrow lean face. The twins would be difficult to besiege, but perhaps you can sneak men inside. Walder Free is a coward, a cheat, an oathbreaker and a traitor, but he is not a fool. He will not allow strangers or unknown merchants or wandering minstrels into the twins. His sons and grandsons are cravens, sots and whoremongers, but they can guard a castle wall. There are certainly enough of them to do that. Tali said. Lord Tytos, I am sure my brother can find a way. He did so at King's Landing. Sangza said. I do not doubt Snow's cunning. I saw his tricks at the God's Eye. But Walder Free is a different creature. He will take no risks. He will squat at the twins like a toad. If he sees your banners, Lord Tytos, he will hang your son. Tali's blunt comments were not well received. But better to accept the truth than live in dreams. John realized that despite the words of anger against Lord Walder, he could not depend on Tytos Blackwood for action. They heard the howls as darkness fell over the Blue Fork. As the ruins of old stones came into sight, so did the eyes, amber and yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. There were dozens of pairs near the bottom of the hill, and more hidden behind the elm and oak trees. Wolves. The fat Tali boy squeaked in fear, to his father's disgust. Sander Clegane chuckled. If we were going to feed you to wolves, we would have done it at Harrenhal. And not fed you on the trip. John, I can sense Nymeria. Arya said. He nodded. He felt the presence of Ghost nearby, and the comfort of his bond with the great white wolf. Dock the ship. We will go ashore. Shouldn't we wait until morning? Alyn said aghast. We cannot defend you in the dark. We do not need protection from our wolves. Nymeria met them at the end of the stony road. The dire wolf stared at the guards but led John and his sisters into the ruins. They found Rob in the castle yard with Ghost, resting next to the crypt of the ancient River King. His breathing was steady and deep, but the Lord of Winterfell did not wake from his slumber, even at Sansa and Arya's touch. The Vale Knights stood quietly to the side, where the small fire cast shadows on crumbled stone. Sir Alyn, Brian and the Hound waited as well with the other Stark men. John motioned for Geryon to approach, and the boy brought Sir Michael with him. How was Rob hurt? John asked. Maester, the phrase disguised crossbowmen as musicians at the feast. After they served Lord Rob a dish of a dead wolf, they attacked. I tried to get him to flee the tent. But they shot Talisa in the back, the side and the belly. Greywind died killing the crossbowman. Jerry said. Lord Stark collapsed when his wolf died. We dragged his body out of the tent. Michael added. Talisa is dead. John said sommily. He bowed his head when Jerry nodded. Who is Talisa? Sansa asked. Talisa Magai. A healer. A noble woman from Volantis that Rob met in the Reach. She was a good woman, and Rob's beloved. John answered. My lord, there was something else. Talisa told me that she carried Rob's child. She expected a babe in 6 moons. Jerry said to the shock of John's sisters. And Rob knew. John asked. Jerry nodded again. So Rob knew that his unborn child had died. No wonder. Sir Michael put a knee on the ground. Lord Snow, I was not aware of the babe. I tried to cover their escape, but my shield was only large enough to protect Lord Rob from the quarrels. I should have guarded Lady Talisa with my life. Rise, sir. You did what you could. I suspect there were many archers and crossbowmen. They killed our nephew or niece. Arya raged. The phrase murdered Rob's wife and child while pretending to be our allies. They were not married, but they would have been. Rob told me he wanted to wed under the heart tree in Winterfell. John added. They killed many others, Maester. And they captured many Northmen as well. I will hear the names later, Jerry. Now, I would speak with my sisters. John said. After Sir Michael and Jerry left, John examined his brother's face and milky white eyes. He touched a finger to the neck and measured the pulse on the wrist. He sighed and stroked Ghost's fur. The dire wolves curled at the feet of the 3 Starks and Snow, and howled softly, a cold and lonely sound, a song of grief for their packmate. They missed Grey Wind, Jon realized, their fallen brother. What does this mean? The wound on his shoulder is not deep. Why is Robb not waking up? Sansa said. Sansa, you must not tell anyone this. Not even your friend Jane. We have a bond with our dire wolves. I can slip into Ghost's skin and see through his eyes. You are a warg. I heard stories in King's Landing that you summoned wolves and ravens against the Lannisters. They are true then. Sansa said. Jon gave a thin smile. A kernel of truth, perhaps. Ravens are carrion birds. They were already at the Red Fork, and Nymeria led the pack of wolves. I can walk into Ghost. Arya has dreams of Nymeria. I believe this is what happened. Robb was unarmed at the feast. He walked into Grey Wind to fight the Freys. And he was still in Grey Wind when the dire wolf died. Robb would give up his life to save Talisa and his child. And in a way, he did. But what happens now, Jon? Is he lost to us? Arya said. I don't know. There are legends of skin changers from many thousand years ago. They say a Stark of Winterfell killed the Warg King at Sea Dragon Point and took his daughters as a prize. There is Warg blood in all of the Starks, even Bran and Rickon. Truly, it may be easier for our younger brothers. But for Robb, he must have suffered greatly when the bond was broken by Grey Wind's death. It may take a long time for that to heal, and for him to return. Jon said. But he will return. Sansa asked. I think he will, but there are no stories of wargs south of the wall. They say that Bloodraven was a sorcerer and a bastard who could summon wolves and speak to crows. But then, they say the same about me. Jon said. What will we do now? Sansa said. What do you mean? We should be killing any Freys we can find. They broke guest right. They murdered Mother. They hurt Robb. They killed his child. They captured our lords. Arya said. And the last is the problem. You heard Lord Tytos at Fairmarket. He might hate the Freys, but he won't attack the twins. Not while they threaten to kill his son. How many other houses will feel the same? The Freys have taken our lords as prisoners. Sansa said. What do you suggest? Jon asked. We do not have the strength for a siege. Let us take Robb home to Winterfell so he can heal. We can rebuild the northern forces over time. Sansa said. Jon raised a hand to stop Arya's burst of anger. What about our bannermen? The ones who died and the ones who were captured. What will we say if we run away from the Freys? We have hundreds of prisoners, Jon. We can trade some for our lords. Walder Free will be eager to return men like Kevan Lannister to the Iron Throne. Sansa said. We would be craven and we would be forced to live with this dishonor. Reward the Freys for their treachery. I would rather drink a barrel of piss. Arya said. Robb would be alive. We would be safe in the north. And when our armies are stronger, we can siege the twins then. We will get revenge even if it takes many years. Sansa said. Rewarding treachery only produces more traitors. And we owe a duty to our men, Stark men. We will not leave our honor or our men to the mercy of Walder Free. Our bannermen pledged an oath to us, to shield our back and give their life for ours. We made an oath to them, a place by our hearth and mead at our table. And I will keep that oath, no matter what the cost. Robb would have fought. Ned Stark would have fought. And so will I. Jon said. But Jon, if you attack the castle, the prisoners will die. We don't have many men. And our banners will not fight if their lords or sons are at risk. Sansa said. All that is true. But we are Starks. Starks don't give up. We fight. We fight for the North. We fight for our pack. We fight to protect our people. Our bannermen depend on us. If we don't fight, no one else will. Jon said. The sky was grey and cloudy over the twins, the gatehouse towers slick and wet from the rain. The waters swelled over their banks into a torrent, and the twin moats cut from the banks seemed only paltry puddles compared the mighty river. The green fork ran straight and swift under the arched bridge. At the center of the bridge, a stone water tower rose, the battlements higher than any gatehouses. The free banner hung like a rude taunt over the castle walls, blue towers connected by a blue bridge on a silver-grey field. On the western side of the green fork, there were thousands of men, but the banners were limp, dripping wet outside tents and on sodden horses. John thought he could see the cast-dark sun and the Maester eagle, but he might have been mistaken. Here at the Twins, the world was a dismal, colorless grey. A cluster of high-born nobles had gathered before the gates of the castle. John pushed forward, the wolves at his side, the guards flanking them and protecting his sisters. A few startled Northmen, glovers, flints and reeds, gasped when they saw him, but he continued, guiding his horse to the disturbance. He passed Eddard Carstark, small John Umber and a hobbling Wendell Marndale, his arm wrapped in bandages. On the parapet next to the main castle, a dirty disheveled Edmure Tully in ragged clothes was being dragged forward by two cowled men. The lean one held a dagger to Tully's unshaven neck. The fat one carried a noose by both hands and pantomimed sticking the Lord of Riverrun heads through the loop made by the hangman's knot. But that was asinine. On top of a castle wall, there was no way to suspend the body. And a knife made the rope irrelevant. How often do they bring Edmure out? John asked loudly. The startled riverlords turned just as his sisters arrived. Lady Sansa, you are free. Praise the Seven, the tales are true, Snow rescued you from the Red Keep. The Blackfish said. We can speak of that later, sir. Your nephew, why and when do they bring him out? They trot Edmure out like a horse in the morning. They have done it each day for the last 7 to demand that we bend the knee. Fucking phrase. The Blackfish said to many nods. John squinted up at the wall. Who are the two with him? The fat one is Ryman Free. Sometimes he has Black Walder hold the knife. Other times it is Edwin. Those are Ryman's 2 older sons. They are treacherous scum, even worse than their father and grandfather. Tytos said. John doubted that. Their grandfather, Lord Walder, was the original stain. But it was a waste of time to compare shit to other shit. Just Edmure. Do they bring out anyone else, the other heirs and captives? No, my lord. I have been at the Twins for the past week. I have not seen anyone else, and definitely not my heir Patrek. Jason Maester. Odd. John said. The two Freys, realizing they had lost their audience, dragged Edmure back to the castle. The Tully Lord went meekly, and a flash of disapproval passed over Sir Brynden. John realized that the Blackfish wanted Edmure to kick and resist, but some men were born lords and not fighters. Sir Brynden had aged a great deal in the last moon. Lord Snow, what of Robb Stark? He saved Seaguard from Euron Crow's Eye before the Free Feast. Jason Maester asked. I found him. Our men took him to safety. Robb is alive, but not well. Until he recovers, I am Lord of Winterfell. The remaining commanders of the Northern Army had joined the Riverlords. There were many missing. Tell me, who was captured by the Freys and who was killed? We have those names, and we have brought our prisoners as you asked. But there is something else you must see. Perhaps you should send your sisters away. The Blackfish said, the pain clear in his hoarse voice. I want to stay, John. Arya exclaimed. John clenched his hands tightly. Life was not a song. I will not keep secrets from my true-born siblings. What do you need to show us? Sir Brynden led them to a small tent with the shield of a silver trout hanging on the outside. Maester Viman, an old tired man, opened the tent flaps, revealing 24 corpses waiting for burial. In the center, a dead female lay in a place of honor, covered by a white sheet up to her neck. John heard Nymaria's howl of anger, and gasps of shock from his sisters. The auburn-haired woman had been beautiful once, but the pale flesh was wrinkled and puffed from days in the water. Catelyn Stark's dead eyes looked up out of her face, marred by shredded skin and blackened blood. Her throat had been slit to the bone. Arya sobbed and gently closed those blue eyes while Sansa held her mother's hand. The Freys dumped her body naked into the green fork. They stole her jewels, her clothes and her dignity. They threw her into the river to mock House Tully. In death, our lords and ladies returned to the Trident, buried in their feast clothes and with their treasures. They shamed her. Did they defile my mother? Sangza asked Sir Brindan. She died trying to escape, Lady Sangza. Lotharfree told us so at Seven Streams. She tried to warn your brother Rob and was killed in the attempt. A brave death. Sir Michael said. Those words offered no solace to Catelyn Stark's daughters. Brynden Tully was the first to pay his respects. The Blackfish delivered the prisoners held at Riverrun and then sat at Rob's side. True to his word, Brynden had collected the names of the missing and there were many. The Great Jon, Lord Carstark, Galbart Glover, Daisy Mormont, Willis Marndaly, Meja Sewin, Darin Hornwood, and Helman Tallheart. Even more highborn had been lost at the Twins, although that had been more Rivermen heirs than lords. The Northmen and Riverlords came to see Robb Stark. They congratulated Sansa on her escape, scrutinized Robb's face and body, and hurled bitter invectives against the Freys. But on what mattered most, they were silent. No one offered to help fight. No one promised swords and spears to take the Twins. No one swore an oath to avenge Robb. Their words were empty. They are ashamed. Sir Brynden said when they were alone. As am I. What will you do, sir? What have the Freys asked for Edmure's head? Jon asked. They said they would free my nephew in exchange for your brother. I have no doubt they have made similar offers to other houses. And will you take the offer? Trust the word of a Free. I would slit my wrists first. Galbart Glover had the right of it when the army first reached the Twins. He said Walder Free was not to be trusted. And now Glover is a prisoner. Lothar demanded that I yield Riverrun. And if his wife bears a son, I am certain Edmure will have an accident. And then Walder Free will control the Tully heir. Brynden spat. Edmure is a prisoner. Surely he is not bedding the Free girl. My nephew is a good man, but he has a soft heart. If the Free girl weeps over him and holds his hand, he will forgive her. Or Walder Free might put a bastard in her belly, and pretend that child is a Tully. Expect the worst from a Free and you will not be disappointed. Brynden said. But you still will not fight against the Freys? Jon asked. I will hold Riverrun against them. But I cannot storm the walls of the Twins. Edmure is my brother's only son. Really his only living child, now that Cat is dead and Lysa has gone mad. Without you leading the Tully forces, none of the other Rivermen will fight. Jon said. I know. Walder Free is a treacherous rat but a clever one. Sir Brynden made to leave. Wait, sir. I still have a task for you. Jon said. I cannot risk Edmure's life. You do not need to. But if you want revenge for your niece and Robb's mother, then there is something I can entrust to you. Very well, tell me how I can help. The Blackfish said. The Stark camp had expanded, but there were still not enough soldiers. A few survivors of Robb's battle guard stood watch over the young wolf but they were watched in turn by Sir Alyn, the Vale Knights and Winterfell men. The tents were stuffed with highborn prisoners, the Wintertown boys, little birds, and too few fighters. Outside the tents, wolves roamed at night in the nearby hills, a giant pack that had no fear of armed men in mail and boiled leather. They followed Nymeria, their queen, and sang under the waning moon with the great she-wolf. The howls terrified the horses and prisoners. How many men do we have? Jon asked. Less than 1,000, my lord. But Mage Mormont is only a few days away, and perhaps she will add her numbers to ours. Alyn said. And how many soldiers are at the Twins? The Freys had nearly 2,000 men at Seven Streams. We killed some in the fighting but not that many. And the Freys may have held more back at the Twins. Sir Michael said. What about the Rivermen? Why are they here if they won't fight? Arya said. They are duty-bound to attempt a rescue of their liege lord. They simply have no idea how to do so. Unfortunately, the Rivermen were more quarrelsome than clever. You are the Lord of Winterfell, Jon. Without Robb, you are the liege lord of the Umbers, the Carstarks, the Marndalis. You could order them to attack the walls. Sansa said. Robb is alive, so he is Lord of Winterfell. I am his regent. It is a hard thing to ask a son to risk his father's life, or a brother to watch his brother die. I would rather have fewer men I trust, than a larger force of uncertain loyalties. Will you obey me without question against the phrase? Sir Michael knelt. My lord, you have my sword. I pledged my faith to your brother and House Stark. I failed to keep Robb Stark safe, and I would avenge his betrayal. We are Stark men. I made my vows to Ned Stark. I will keep faith with his sons. Alan said. The other Stark guards followed, as did Robar Royce and the Valiman. Lord Lyman, Lady Went and Lord Beric swore their loyalty, although they had very few men. Even Sandor Clegane knelt for a brief moment. Only Brian held out. Lady Brian, you swore an oath to Catelyn Stark. She is dead, murdered by the phrase. If you wish to leave service to our house, you may. Jon said. I swore to return Lady Sansa to her mother, but now that she is dead, I would make sure that she arrives at Winterfell safely. But I do not see how the phrase can be defeated. They outnumber your forces and they are behind strong castle walls. It is not a sign of courage to fight only when you will win. Or to be loyal in good times, but not bad. In this world, victory and defeat are not certain. You must fight for it. I will obey your orders, Snow. I swear it by the Seven. Brian said. We might be able to get some other allies, Jon. A raven to Lord Reed in Greywater Watch, or the garrison at Moat Cailin. Sansa said. He shook his head. I know how to take the twins. I only need a few more days, not more men. Obey my orders and do not speak to anyone else. Jon was north of the castle with Ghost and Balerion when a red-headed piper boy found him surveying the broken bridge with the Wintertown boys. For the most part, the piers still stood, although the planks on top had been swept away. Half the logs that connected the 25 pairs of pilings remained, as did many of the braces and supports. The Freys were either too stupid or too lazy to do a thorough job. Lord Snow, Lord Snow. The young lad huffed and puffed, bent over from the run. You are Lord Piper's younger son. The Freys want a parley, my lord. They have come down from the castle, half a dozen of them with their men-at-arms and knights. I have nothing I wish to speak to any Freys about. Jon said bluntly. And how do you know it is not a trap? They claim they wish to exchange prisoners. Not Lord Tully, but perhaps some knights. Lewis Piper said. The boy plainly hoped that his brother would be traded. Jon doubted that. He released 2 ravens into the air. The blackbirds soared into the sky, one flying over the castle walls, and the other the field in front of the gatehouse where Free knights had gathered under a white flag of parley. There were no signs of an ambush. Very well, I will come. And as Jon walked back with Ghost at his side, he thought of Brynden Rivers and the Black Fires pretenders. Bloodraven had not haggled terms with traitors. He had served them fire and blood. They were waiting for him, the Riverlords, the Northern commanders, his sisters and the Freys. The Blackfish had set up a cordon of crossbowmen and armored knights in a semicircle around the castle. A formidable defense, but the Freys were unlikely to resort to treachery. Jon saw them in their thick cloaks of grey wool, sharp-beaked, snot-nosed and weak-chinned, taking after Lord Walder. Lame Lothar gave an unctuous smile, while Ryman and his 3 sons glared about hatefully. Other sallow suspicious men followed, rat-faced Innis, stupid Hostine, Simond the Coin-Counter, and Dor Danwell. He made sure to remember all of them. Ah, Snow. I am sorry we have to meet again under such circumstances. We would have liked having you as a guest. Lothar said. Get to the point. No one wants to spend time talking with lying weasels. And you address Lord Snow, Warden of the North. The Blackfish said. Lord Snow. I heard that his brother was still alive. But perhaps that will change. Lothar said. Where is Mark? What have you done with my son? He was a guest at your bloody wedding. Clement Piper said with outrage. He is safe in our cells. His knights and men-at-arms feed the fishes of the Trident. And so will your Piper heir, if Pink Maiden doesn't bend the knee. Ryman snapped. Will you trade my father? It took a dozen of you to subdue him, even when he was dead drunk and unarmed. Imagine how many Freys he would have killed sober. Small Jon Umber said. That is not possible until the Umber soldiers are far away from our castle. Lothar chuckled. No, we mean to trade some lesser names. Perhaps Sir Robin Roger for Kevan Lannister and his sons. Sir Robin lives? Lord Tytos asked. He does, although wounded. Brynnet thinks he may lose his right arm, but so far the Maester has only cut off 3 fingers. A crippled old knight for Tywin Lannister's brother. Surely you do not take us for fools? Brynden retorted. Roger for Kevan Lannister, and his sons Willem and Martin. Lothar said. I did not know you were a jester, lame Lothar. I thought you were only a lying weasel that stabbed men in the back. I would rather hang Sir Kevan than bend the knee to the likes of you. Jon Osbracken yelled to the agreement of many in the room. The Riverlords did most of the shouting. The Frey sniggered and sneered, certain that they held the whip hand. The Northmen were angry, but they held their tongues. Jon had enough of this mummers farce. The prisoners belong to Winterfell, Lord Bracken. They are not yours to hang or exchange. Jon said. These are my terms. House Free will hand over all captives. Walder Free will surrender the twins. The Freys will be stripped of their lands for breaking guest right. The men who killed Lady Stark, Lady Talisa and Grey Wind will be given to me to hang. The Freys gaped in shock until Lothar gave a shrill laugh. And why would we do any of that, bastard? Bend the knee and I will only kill a few of you. Your sire, of course, and those who directed these crimes. Refuse, and I will destroy House Free, root and stem. Jon said. You do not have enough men. You cannot pass our walls, even with your full army. And we have captured the lords of your army. Even the father, the warrior and the stranger could not take the twins without the death of the prisoners. Lothar smirked. Then pray to the Seven for mercy, for I will give you none. Soon enough, your line will end. Jon walked away, leaving behind a stunned crowd. He had more important things to do. Author's notes. The Wolves discover Jerry and Robb scene is based on the Season 7, Episode 2 meeting of Arya and Nymeria. I think the last seasons would be much better with more dire wolves, like imagine a Nymeria /Ghost team up. The dire wolves know that Jerry was heading south, and wolves have great senses of smell and hearing. Plus they are magical. In Storm of Swords, Jon dreams about a dead dire wolf. He wonders whether Summer was killed by the Thans, but it is really Grey Wind. I haven't reread the Bran chapters, but the magic in Jon's blood is very strong as Bran, but wasted. Of course, you can argue Bran's whole 3-eyed raven acid trip is also a huge waste too. The Queen of Thorns is a bit of a hypocrite, but the Purple Wedding only targeted Joffrey. The Red Wedding, as Tyrion notes, involves thousands of dead guests. If you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. The first reference to this is the John Webster play, The White Devil, in 1612. That said, the general saying may be much older. All sides underestimate the church after Tywin's death and before Cersei blows up the Great September. I wonder if this is a comment on the history of the Roman Catholic Church, powerful in bursts but prone to overreach and setbacks. Think of the medieval Crusades. I know in the books, Margaery and Olenna just cluck to Sansa about the Red Wedding. But here there is a high likelihood of retribution against their own men. After all, if the Red Wedding happened and Jaime was a prisoner, he would likely be dead or crippled. In the books, Robb allows the Rivermen to go back to their castles. Immediately after, little Lyman, 8 or 9 years old, is killed by the Mountain. With the extinction of the line, the Iron Throne awards Dare to Lancel and Gatehouse Amy. Shellowent gets screwed too. In Dante's Inferno, the lowest, 9th, circle of hell belongs to traitors. That puts in perspective Jon Snow stabbing Dany in the Iron Throne. Officially, Walder Free has 22 true-born sons, and 7 true-born daughters. So 30 is rounding up. But the wiki says that Walder has sired over 100 descendants. That's a lot. Explain it to me why it is more noble to kill 10,000 in battle than a dozen at dinner. This is Tywin Lannister's justification for the Red Wedding, a deed that he does not admit outside his family. I think in the books, he only tells Tyrion. Of course, it wasn't a dozen. It was thousands. It is like Stalin saying killing millions in the gulags is fine because it keeps the peace. Kinship counts for no more than guest right at the twins. That is a quote from Tytos when he is surrendering to Jaime Lannister in Dance of the Dragons. Wolf eyes actually do glow in the dark. They have a special light reflecting surface behind their retinas. They are adapted for nocturnal hunting. Arya's line about drinking piss comes from several of the reactions to the phrase. Lord Piper said I would rather drink a pint of piss than take the word of the Free. Wyman Mondaly says something about how the phrase want them to eat excrement and smile. Jon's disagreement with Sansa is perhaps a bit too honorable. As a king or lord, you have to make compromises. A good example is Ned Stark ignoring the death of Elia Martell's children. But remember also the treatment of prisoners. In the books, the captured Mondaly is fed human flesh, Vargo Hoat, at Harrenhal. When Willis is freed by Jaime Lannister, he collapses in tears, his spirit totally shattered. Some of the dialogue in the exchange with the phrase comes from Feast of Crows during the Siege of Riverrun. Lord Piper threatens Edwin Free in front of Jaime and the War Council. Some good lines there. I thought about a bigger role for Brynden Tully, but I decided he would be better as quiet and effective versus loud and useless. The Blackfish was tough as nails. Root and stem comes off a few times in Game of Thrones. Arya Stark uses the phrase in a speech before poisoning the phrase. Daenerys and Cersei both use it as well. Jon's demands and threats mirror the burning of Harrenhal. Of course, Aegon's plan was more obvious. The Freys are quite confident. They see no reason to fear Jon, not yet. Chapter 35, God of War. Chapter text. God of War. There was no ale or mead for dinner, not even for the sons of Lord Walder. At first, the boy was not surprised. Wine, ale, and cider had been consumed by the bucket at Lord Trout's wedding, and a far larger quantity shipped to Seven Streams, hundreds of barrels and kegs and casks to lull the Northmen into a drunken stupor. The castle's provisions ran low, not the best state before a potential siege. But then he saw that Ryman, famous as a glutton and drunk, had no wine with his food. And that Hosteen Free was armored and armed, with a heavy kite shield at his feet. The older Freys were sullen and resentful, more so than usual, and lacking the braggadocio of the morning. Big Walder Free, the 9-year-old son of Jarmos, had spied on Lothar and the others when they returned to the hall from the meeting. Snow's words were dismissed as the ravings of a lunatic. True, the wolves had unexpected success on the field, but that came with their full army and the element of surprise. In 200 years, no man had dared to assault the twins. And when they cut off a hand from a Maester or foot from a Hornwood, the army would splinter and abandon the Starks. Perhaps, Lothar jested, the Freys would give Roslyn more wolf pelts for her wedding. Simon boasted that with the promise of freedom for a lord, he might bribe an Umber or Karstark to steal Robb's insensate body from the camp. There was no bragging or bluster at dinner. Ryman grumbled about the lack of drink and gorged himself on chicken and onions, the juices dripping over his set of chins. But the other Freys were not so piggish. Innes and Jared huddled together, surrounded by knights and goodsons. Hosteen left after bolting down a gob of meat and strapping the shield on his broad back. Servants delivered messages to Edwin and soldiers to Black Walder. Something was afoot, but what could have changed that day? No ravens had flown to the twins. No prisoners had died. Most importantly, Lord Trout was locked away. Big Walder had passed Roslyn, her face streaked with tears, returning from her daily visit to the cells. He finished the meal, pocketing 2 trenchers of bread dipped in brown gravy. Big Walder made his way to the other set of dungeons, where a copper-groat bought passage to see Sir Robert, his mother's younger brother. 2 page girls had married into the Freys, but his uncle was one of Edmure Tully's bold companions, all of whom languished at the twins. Uncle. Big Walder rapped on the cell, waving the half-loaves of bread. Don't call me that. Sir Robert's velvet tunic was soiled, the twining red and white snake sigil ripped and stained. Bruises and a broken nose marked the formerly handsome face. I am sure they give you little to eat. The boy held the trencher forward, a drop of gravy dripping on the muddy ground. This close to the river, the doors, walls and floor were perpetually damp. The knight snatched the bread. Why are you here, Walder? Your father killed Sir Kellery at the wedding. The Vances will not forget their dead brother. Have you heard anything, sir? The knight snorted. What news would I hear that you have not? The whole castle knows of Jon Snow's demands. He wants Lord Walder's head, the captives freed and the twins surrendered. And what do you think? Who doesn't want Lord Walder dead? Your father and uncles have longed for that for years. Sadly, the old weasel lives on. The Hornwood boy swears that Snow will rescue them, but I don't see how. The Northmen claim the White Wolf is a sorcerer. Big Walder had heard stories that Jon Snow drank the blood of his enemies and conjured flocks of crows and packs of wolves in battle. A few days ago, a scout returned with a particularly outlandish tale. The bastard had made fools of the Lannisters and burned the Iron Throne when he rescued Sansa Stark from the Imp's clutches. Lothar ordered the man whipped for spreading lies. No one could cozen Lord Tywine. That was known. His uncle devoured the trencher and demanded the other hunk of bread. I was at Riverrun when Snow arrived to help his brother break the siege. He set a siege tower on fire and toppled it on a shield wall of Crickehall and Marbrand men. He burned them alive. Jaime Lannister's forces were on the field. Our men are behind thick walls. I hope he kills you all. I don't see how Snow can take the castle, but I will pray that the stranger waits outside your door. If death comes, it will come for all of us, including Edmure and you. Big Walder said. Worth dying to see Lord Walder punished for his crimes. Sir Robert spat and turned away. His uncle said no more. Big Walder walked from the courtyard to the outer bailey, passing the chapel and the sounds of prayer of women to the Mother, the Maiden, and the Crone. He climbed the stairs of the gatehouse that hung over the drawbridge. When he reached the battlements full of soldiers, Big Walder suddenly knew why his uncles had turned sullen. On the western side of the Green Fork, 1,000 campfires burned as far as the eye could see. A vast number of shields hung on trees and tents, sigils hidden by the flames. And lines of men marched, with many torches held up high in the night. How could the Stark numbers have increased so much? Big Walder was not the only one nervous. The soldiers and knights kept a wary vigil, arrows and quarrels knocked and catapults ready to fire. It would be a long night on the walls. He flew over the gloom, the fading light in the sky no trouble for a raven's sharp eyes. The twins truly were twins, identical stone keeps with the same numbers of walls, towers, and baileys, and equidistant from the water tower. Each castle had a high-vaulted great hall, and above that hall, a large windowed bedroom for the Lord of the Crossing. Walder Free reserved both rooms for his use alone, so he could fondle young women in privacy. That night, the meal was served in the western hall, and the sons and grandsons of Lord Walder clustered later at the gatehouse and barbican overlooking the northern camps. A few soldiers manned the defences to the east, but Jon had no doubt the bulk of the Free forces were in the keep west of the Trident. Unfortunately, the Raven, even with keen eyes and ears, could not find the dungeons, likely hidden in the depths of the castle. For that, he would need a different animal, one used to skulking in dark corridors, and frightened by no man or beast. Jon cradled Balerion in both arms, when a loud cry rang through the tent. "My lord, you cannot go in, unannounced!" Chet cried. The Black Tom hissed and jumped to the floor. Jon pulled aside the makeshift screen to see the hound snarling at a bunch of rivermen. "Lord Tytos, what can I do for you?" "I want in, Lord Snow." "I know you are planning something." Lord Tytos had come with his two sons, hot-headed Brynden and bookish Hoster. "And what am I planning?" "I don't know. But when I see Tully men set 5 fires each, I know that is not for cooking meat. And old Desmond Grell doesn't huff and puff up the Green Fork, tossing a torch away at the end of every march, for no reason. I despise Lord Walder. He had Lucas killed, and imprisoned my liege and young Ben. I would give much to bloody the phrase. But not your men," Jon said. Lord Blackwood did not hide his bitterness. "I cannot risk Lord Tully or Ben." Jon thought for a moment. "There is a shipyard near the Whispering Wood that serves the merchants of Ramsford and Fairmarket. Get the yardmaster and buy all the rope, canvas, nails and pitch. Bring them to the Wintertown crew as soon as possible. I will rush out there and drag him out of bed." Tytos said. Jon rolled his eyes. "That is exactly what I do not want you to do. If Lord Blackwood rode down with his knights to Fairmarket, the Freys might find out. Send Hoster instead to rouse him. Have Brynden organize a convoy of wagons to bring the supplies in the morning." "But what can I do?" Tytos said, frustrated. A smile crossed Jon's face. "Tomorrow afternoon, before the sun goes down, I want you to pick a fight with John O'Sbracken. Fight with the Lord Idiot of Stonehenge. Why, that will be as easy as breathing. A public squabble with a lot of shouting. One that the Freys can see from the walls. But I want no one hurt. And afterwards, you and your men will storm off and pretend to leave the camps. And this will help you with your plans. Just like the Tully men. Do your part, Lord Titus. Trust me to do mine. That night, John ate a simple meal of bread and cheese in the tent with his sisters and their guards when Chet stood up at the benches for the Winter Town boys and the little birds. Maester Snow, I had a thought. You asked us to leave for Seven Streams tonight. I did, Chet. The Raven said that Clydas and Denise found many barrels. Maester, Gendry told me something very interesting. The excited boy pointed to the Red Priest. He said that Thoros of Myr could outdrink even King Robert. That he was a sot and a fraud, the worst priest you could ever imagine. The ascetic priest, now grey-bearded and thin, frowned slightly at the embarrassed apprentice. That was rather unkind, Gendry. True but unkind. I am a false priest no longer. The Lord of Light has opened my eyes. Chet interrupted. Maester, you asked the Winter Town boys to scavenge the casks. But it makes far more sense for Thoros to steal a keg of mead or ale. John cocked an eye at the startled Thoros. True. Lord Beric and Thoros, the Freys departed Seven Streams in a rush, leaving behind many discarded barrels. How many Brotherhood men do you have from here to Seven Streams? A few dozen, Lord Snow. And allies and sympathizers in the area, from septons, serving wenches, and in keeps. Beric answered. You mean, bandits, thieves and whores. Sander Clegane snorted. Take Chet with you to Seven Streams and have your men bring back every cask, pipe and hogshead near the tents. What do you need wine or ale for? A confused Thoros asked. I don't need wine. I need empty barrels, as many as can be found. Forgive us, Snow, but we don't understand. Michael Redfort said. He expressed the curiosity that many others in the tent had. John spoke in a kindly voice. That is why you are a knight, sir, and not a maester. The next few days will be a time for maesters. But soon enough, we will need strong arms and swords. Then there will be night work and night's work. Bleary-eyed soldiers stumbled into the great hall the next morning. The fires had burned well into the night. And when the flames dwindled to embers that still lit the western shoreline, the wolves began to howl. Through stone walls and wooden doors, the howls echoed through the castle, sending shivers down the spines of women and children. Even grown men, armed with long swords and shields, watched the shadows nervously. Big Walder Free had slept poorly. Each time he managed to fall asleep, the howling would get louder. And his two snot-nosed younger brothers sobbed through the night, afraid that the wolves would kill them all. That was Cousin Mary's fault. She had dreamed of a bleeding and burning giant torn to pieces by wolves on a river. The hysterical girl had told everyone who would listen about her so-called vision. Mary Ann should have been a mummer, he thought. There were no giants at the twins. How did the bastard get so many men? Black Walder asked. We can hardly ask our spies now. Simon snapped back. It doesn't matter. Lothar said. With Tully a prisoner and Robb Stark near death, Snow's forces will fade away. The Riverlords know that we will hang their heirs. The Northmen will learn that soon enough. The bastard cannot hold his army together. Lame Lothar was right. That morning, the shields on the trees had vanished. The light drizzle made the entire world seem grey, and soldiers could be seen slinking south with their horses. If Snow had more men, they were hiding in the ragged tents, and certainly no threat to the Freys. From an embrasure in a parapet, Big Walder spied on a line of high-born prisoners, ladies and boys, being delivered to the Stark tent by a short woman in plate armor. Wagons, merchants, and a surprising number of children could be seen at the camps, but fewer and fewer men. And those men were not armored knights on war horses or well-trained archers and crossbowmen but a motley crew of unruly small folk. Later, a spat broke out between the Blackwoods and the Brackens. The two Riverlords stood nose to nose, pushing and shoving, to the great displeasure of Brynden Tully. Old wounds were reopened, in particular how the Brackens provided 2 mistresses to Egon the Unworthy, sisters eager to serve the old whoremonger on their knees. John O's Bracken insulted the manliness of the Blackwoods, calling them prissy pansies, more interested in the company of strapping young men than wenches. Titos shot back that none of his sons wanted a Bracken whore. The exchange deteriorated from there, into the shaking of fists and waving of swords. In the end, the 2 sides were forced apart and no blood was shed. The Blackfish called the 2 men dunces, a sentiment shared by many observers. Both lords stormed off, furious, and the Blackwood knights mounted horses to ride away. On the second night, his uncles grinned and smirked as they crammed down salt pork and turnip mash. Only half as many fires burned, and many were small, the flames barely surviving the light rain. Fewer tents dotted the shore, and there were no tread buckets, siege towers, ladders, or battering rams. Half a dozen catapults lay on the grass, but in pieces, with no crew fixing the broken machines. Snow did not have the means to break the gates or storm the walls. After dark, wolves howled, but the cries were farther away. No attack came in the night. And in the light of the morning, the once feared northern army looked even weaker. "I say we toss our night soil down at the Starks," Edwin said. "When disease breaks out in their camps, Snow will run like a dog. Our men can sally forth and capture the prisoners. And do you plan to lead us in the charge? Would you like to confront the North on the field?" Lame Lothar said. "I am not a man of the sword," Edwin said, his nose pinched and thin lips pressed into a sneer. He looked like a man sniffing his own shit. "Our knights and men have barely slept the last 2 nights. The Mormonts arrived yesterday. There are only a few, but their fighters are fresh from holding the tooth," Simon said. "The Mormonts are no worry. I would be happy to catch more she-bears to warm my bed for the cold winter nights," Black Walder Free said, with an ugly smile. On the 3rd day, very little happened. A siege, without equipment, sorties or skirmishes, was deadly dull. Boredom and routine reigned over the twins. Edmure was dragged out by a leash, but the threat barely registered. The Freys were used to the antics, the Riverlords were busy squabbling, and the North did not care. Big Walder attended lessons with the Maester and wondered if the siege would soon be over. Outside the walls, squires packed tents and saddled horses, and the small folk children disappeared. That night, the fires along the Green Fork dwindled further. Servants brought ale and wine again, with fish pie and roast lamb. No one guzzled and ate more than Ryman Free, his blotchy face red and bloated. The 3rd night would be a moonless sky. 14 days had passed since the traitors' feast, and the preparations were finished, if rushed. Everything had been built, but not yet tested. There was no time for that. John had told Arya and Sansa the complete plan. The others, Stark guards, the knights, the Wintertown boys, and the little birds, received instructions on their role only. A few minor houses, Cranogmen, mountain clans, and bastard knights, offered their aid. John refused, preferring silence. He would not risk any whisper reaching the Freys. It was harder though to deny the Mormonts, who were eager to join in any assault. "We want to fight. We want to avenge Daisy," the she-bear said in a private conference with House Stark. "Daisy is not dead. But if the Freys see House Mormont, that could change." "You know nothing," Snow Lyra yelled. "What Lyra means to say is that you may be clever, but you do not understand the world. House Mormont has fought the Krakens and the Wildlings for hundreds of years. We know what happens to women captured in battle," Mage said firmly. "She is a hostage. Surely the Freys would not subject her to such abuse?" Sansa asked. "This is not your father or brother, Lady Sansa. These are the Freys. Lord Walder might demand his turn first before letting his sons rape my daughter. I will not let Daisy rot at the twins. Better dead than a broodmare for Walder Free," Mage said. "I had 5 daughters, Snow. 1 died for you in battle. Lyra and I might die trying to rescue Daisy. But if we all pass, then Lyanna will rule Bear Island. She can make more Mormonts. I will not allow the Freys to abuse Daisy." The women of Bear Island were fierce and proud. Lyanna was only a girl of 9 name days when the Northern Army departed Winterfell. "No, Lady Mage. You made vows to House Stark. You will serve better by appearing to depart south. The entire army appears to be heading south. Lyra snooked. Are we going to allow the phrase to laugh at us? To think the North is weak. All warfare is based on deception. Let the phrase laugh all they want. Appearing weak is not weakness. I cannot tell you the plans, but I will say this. Look for me tomorrow at dawn. How will they find us? Arya asked pointedly. Give me your war horn. Jon extended his hand to Mage. When you hear it, you will know. It was deep in the night when Jon paddled the raft down the river. The water was cold, the sky was dark, and the trident had quieted from a growl to a ripple, the only noise that broke the silence. Torchlight shone from the gatehouses on the outer walls of the twins. The castle interior, the stone bridge and the water tower were dark. Jon aimed the raft for the central stone pier between two arched channels where the green fork rushed through. Balerion sat next to Jon, the green-yellow eyes staring intently at the bridge. The Black Tom's vision was blurred and grey, but a cat needed far less light to see. Balerion was better at picking up motion and could smell and hear a human from far away. The cat hissed slightly and leaped into the top of a leather satchel. It was time. Jon whirled the grapnel and threw it up toward the bridge. It took 3 tries, but he wrapped the hooks about the crenellations on the stone bridge. He guided the raft so it butted against the stone pier. Then he braced 2 long planks on both ends of the raft. The poles extended far to the side, so the raft would stay in place. He carried the satchel on one shoulder, and extra loops of rope on the other. With Balerion's head peeking over his neck, Jon shimmied up the rope, legs walking up the wall. He leaped over the side, and kneeled, making sure no one had seen or heard him. Balerion descended from the satchel, sniffing the air. All was quiet on the crossing. Jon took a white cloth and signaled to the north. Arya saw the flash of white on the stone bridge and eagerly jumped on board. She joined Ghost and Chet at the front with Sir Michael at the back. The Hound and Brian hesitated. Are we certain this thing won't capsize? Clegane said. The Wintertown boys had built dozens of rafts, out of wood scavenged from the bridge erected by the Northern Army, ropes bought from the yard, and barrels emptied at 7 streams. The Stark guards waited in the hills, while Little Birds and the rest of the crew watched from a pier. Quiet, stupid. Arya said. Sir, these boats won't sink. Chet pointed at the 4 ale barrels lashed to each corner, under the water. The barrels are sealed and empty. Air is lighter than water, so they must float. Are you certain these are seaworthy? Has anyone ever traveled on a raft like this before? Brian asked. Jon just did, and he is already on the bridge. Arya said, rolling her eyes. Your brother is mad. Sander snooked. But he and Brian boarded the bobbing raft. The 3 fighters spread out, while Ghost stayed by Arya's side and Chet steered. Water lapped over the sides, but the trip was quick and untroubled. The boat bumped gently against the first raft. Arya caught the rope that flew over the side of the bridge. She tied the rope end through a large wooden cage and coaxed Ghost into the crate. The dire wolf crouched and they shut the box. On the bridge, Jon cranked the windlass and the pulley plucked Ghost into the air until he disappeared over a crenel. A brief moment later, the rope, sang the crate, was dropped down again into Arya's hand. Arya got off her knees and wrapped legs and arms about the rope. Soon, she was pulled onto the bridge. She took in her surroundings as Jon worked on lifting the others with the pulley and windlass. The dark tower loomed over them, the top a good 40 feet off the bridge. Only a few arrow slits on each side broke the monotony of the grey stone walls until the battlements were reached. No light shone from inside the water tower. 250 feet in either direction, the tall carved doors leading to the castles were shut. Sir Michael, Brian, and Sander Clegane had made it up the bridge. Chet would stay below to lash the rafts together. Jon rolled up the pulley and the windlass, placing it back into a satchel. How do you expect to get into the tower? Are you going to knock? Clegane asked. Could we pick the lock? Brian whispered. The water tower had only one entryway facing east, an arched door of solid oak, reinforced with iron bands. A metal ring was held in the mouth of a hideous devil-like face and attached by a hinge to a plate on the upper right. A door like this will be barred at night, and only opened in the morning, Sir Michael said. John took 2 black leather straps that tied to his wrists and wrapped about the hand, leaving the fingers free. 3 short steel claws were attached to the inner palm of each strap. "We are not going through the door. We are going over the wall." John took out 2 more straps and wrapped them around the feet. The claws hooked out from the soles. The Black Tom nodded, and then jumped into the satchel. John hefted the leather bag over his right arm and the rope over his left. He rubbed Ghost for good luck, and moved to the northern face of the tower to begin the ascent. John climbed like a cat, the tiger claws punching holds and grips into the rough stone with ease. Up and up he went, until the steady burble of the river faded. Twice, near an arrow slit, he stopped, and watched into Balerion. The cat could smell the stink of men through the walls, but detected no movement. The dire wolf could smell even better, but John could not climb with Ghost on his back. He put those thoughts away as he climbed higher and higher until they reached the battlements. Balerion meowed softly into John's right ear. He did not need the warning. From this close, he could hear a soft rattle beyond the parapet. He inched up further, hidden by the melon until the cat leaped onto the roof. There were 2 of them, men in mail shirts, one snoring on his back, and the other dozing, his back against the wall. The Black Tom hissed, and the startled Free Soldier leaned over to examine Balerion. John jumped over the crenel and slammed the steel claws into the man's throat and mouth. Blood gushed out, but John held his right hand over the face until the body went limp. He took out a dagger and cut the sleeper's throat. From the top of the water tower, John could see a few faraway glimmers of torchlight in the castle. He checked the unlocked door, making certain there were no other guards. Silence still ruled over the night. John pulled out the pulley, rope and windlass. He had more work to do. They assembled again on top of the battlements. Balerion had already padded down the stairs and Ghost followed soon after, the dire wolf descending quiet as a shadow. Sir Michael and Brian readied their swords while Clegane dragged the bodies away. "How many do you think are in the water tower?" Arya asked. "Maybe a dozen, but likely asleep. I saw no light on the climb up." John replied. "Should we take captives, Lord Snow? They might tell us where the prisoners are." Michael said. "A captive might lie to save his life, or worse, lead us into a trap. We cannot risk any alarm. Kill everyone that we find. Search every corner and show no mercy." John said. They killed 10 more free men at arms on the way down, all of them still slumbering from the feast that night. Ghost could smell the ale and beer mixed with sweat. On the ground floor, Clegane unbarred the door, letting the cool breeze mix with the stale air. "Well, Snow, you have gotten us into the tower. But 5 of us can't take the twins, unless Arya water dances them all to death. What are you going to do now?" Sander said. "It is the hour of the eel. We have 3 more hours until dawn, and then another hour until they open the castle doors. Every day, a bit after the sunrise, the doors open, and servants walk between the 2 keeps." John said. "What about free soldiers? Do they also come then?" The Hound asked. "Not many. Few men walk the bridge. Every morning, the guards from the gatehouse break their fast at the Great Hall. Now, we have a simple task, to bring more men to the tower." John stepped out on the north side, and waved at Chet. The boy had lashed together both rafts. John waved the white cloth. A line of rafts began to float from the broken wooden bridge, the barrels bobbing on the green fork. On each raft, kneeling guards huddled together with Winter Town boys and little birds. In groups of 8s and 10s, the Stark men began to arrive on the bridge. It was still dark when the operation halted. 31 large rafts were lashed together, front to back, and formed a tail that stretched nearly from the crossing to the wooden piers. After they had finished, John directed the little birds back to the broken bridge, to keep warm in the night. Many of the Winter Town crew stayed on the bridge, and wood, planks, and nails were strewn over the ground floor. Parts and ammunition for 2 carro ballista were dragged up to the battlements, and the archers staked out the slits on the walls facing the 2 keeps. 300 Stark guards sat quietly on the lower floors of the water tower, while archers waited on the higher levels. It was too early to string bows, and load crossbows, so men yawned and waited. John sat on the floor, guarded by the Hound and Arya. He reached out and sensed Nymeria far away, but Balerion the Black Tom probed the castle walls until he had found a forgotten window vent overlooking a storeroom. The cat explored dark corridors, scouting for guards, and smelling for prisoners. Unfortunately, every room stank of sweat and decay. The outside of the twins had a certain gloomy beauty. The inside though was ugly and cramped, a function of too many people in too small a space. John traced Balerion's steps through the keep, down staircases, past kitchens and stables, and through barracks. Soldiers sprawled out in a disorderly mess. The cat traversed the castle, searching and searching, delving into every nook and cranny, until at least the castle had given up its secrets. He opened his eyes. Men were preparing for battle, sharpening weapons, donning armor, and coating bowstrings with wax. The nighttime hours had almost passed, and soon the sky would brighten with the soft light of the sun below the horizon. The nightingales would awake and sing, an odd accompaniment to a bloody battle. Lord Snow, should we call for the rest of our men? There are still a few hundred left at the broken bridge. Alyn asked. No, they will come when the battle begins. The bridge is only wide enough for 2 wagons to cross abreast. We can only place so many archers on the battlements and at the arrow slits. The corridors of the twins are narrow. We are not fighting in the open. The most important element will be surprise. John said. The Freys will have 2,000, my lord. We have 400. We have better men, but they have the numbers, Michael added. Summon our men. John said. They gathered at a guardroom, the leaders of the Stark forces at the front. Angwy the archer, Lord Beric, Thoros of Myr. The bold Vale Knights. Sir Alyn. Brian and Sander Clegane. Jerry and Chet. John addressed them, with Arya and Ghost at his side. 2 weeks ago, the Freys attacked Robb and the North. They slaughtered men at a feast, captured Lord Tully at a wedding to a free girl, killed Lady Stark, and butchered our allies. The Septons and Maesters say that the gods, the old ones and the new, curse those who break guest right. But we are not fighting for the gods. We fight for our brothers. We fight for our men. We fight to show that treachery will lose to honor and justice. Lord Snow, what of women and children? And what if soldiers surrender? Brian asked. I intend to show the same mercy Lord Walder would give us. But as for prisoners, you may take them in battle. Make certain they will not stab you in the back. Your lives are more valuable than Freys. As for Walder and his sons, bring them to me dead or alive. We all want revenge for the fallen at Seven Streams. Sir Robar said. And you shall have it. Whether we live or die, we will make Lord Walder pay. Strike hard and strike true. John said, dismissing the men. Most of the soldiers departed from the room, leaving only the commanders and personal guards, awaiting their orders. Pretty words, Snow, but do you really expect us to take the castle? How do you plan to attack? Clegane said. We have 3 goals. John made a crude drawing of the western castle and marked several rooms. This is the armory of the castle, where they will store extra armor, arrows, polearms, and any siege engines. Arya will go and burn the storeroom. His sister nodded. I have the pitch ready. Perhaps Lord Beric and I should go with her. We have experience setting things on fire. Thoros of Myr said. John nodded. He pointed to the Great Hall. The dungeons are between the Great Hall and the river. We need to secure the prisoners. Brian and Sir Alyn, that is your task. I think the eastern dungeons will be less guarded. Take them first. As for the western castle, send the majority of the guards there. The fighting may be intense at the Great Hall. That is the heart of the castle and where the Freys will make their stand. Remember that the task is the prisoners. Do not risk your lives trying to take the castle. And what is the third goal, Snow? The Hound said. Open the gates. When the attack starts, the Freys will fight at the hall or try to retake the bridge. A small group can make it past the bailey, and to the gatehouse. If we can raise the portcullis and lower the drawbridge, the battle is over. John held out the Mormont warhorn. I am in. The Hound said. So are we. Sir Michael spoke for the 3 other Vale Knights. Together they would storm the gates, or die trying. Good, get ready. When the doors open, we will attack. Chet waited until everyone had left. Maester Snow, you didn't tell them about the final task. Jon smiled. They don't need to know. It is always good to hold something in reserve. Let the Freys commit their forces and we will surprise them once again. You can count on us, Maester. The boy left to join the rest of the crew. For once, it was not raining. The sun had risen over the Green Fork, the sky was clear, and birds chirped in the morning light. The two sets of doors opened, and small folk servants emerged from both sides. Serving girls brought baskets of soiled linen to wash in the river. And soldiers hooted and hollered as they walked the bridge, eager to woo the maids. A black-haired man grabbed a nubile wench by her waist and shoved a hand up her skirts. His companions laughed as the girl stumbled, her pale legs exposed to the thighs. An arrow sprouted in the middle of the bold man's forehead, just above the center of the two close-set eyes. More arrows and quarrels rained down from the slits, and the servants were too stunned to do anything but scream in shock as free men died. The door for the water tower burst open, with Brian, Sir Michael and Clegane leading the way. But no one could match the dire wolf. Ghost cleared the distance between the tower and the western castle in seconds, and sprang through the doors, ripping men apart with the ease of a child playing with toy soldiers. The Hound and the Vale Knights breached the western side and Brian and Sir Alan did the same on the east. Spikes were jammed into the doors, making them impossible to close. In a few minutes, the entire length of the stone bridge was full of Stark men. And at the wooden bridge, rafts launched again on the Trident. Arya was dressed once again as a small folk, in drab browns and forest green. She had hacked off her hair, and the brown cloak covered her red and gold brigandine, and swords. She trotted swiftly to the doors. Hurry up! Gendry groaned under the weight of the firkin in his arms. This is really heavy. I don't see anyone else carrying things. Roll it on the ground, stupid. Arya said. We have to go. You don't see anyone else dawdling. Jon and Ghost had disappeared into the castle with the knights and the Hound. Stark men surged forward, rushing into the keep. As for the servants at the Twins, either they begged for mercy on their knees, or they fled before the attack, shrieking and wailing. They made quick progress, before encountering a staircase to their left. The Black Cat met them at the steps, hissed, and turned. Thoros and Beric lent a hand, the three of them lifting the cask as they descended. Arya followed Balerion, the Tom leading the way. They went left and then right and came to a long corridor. Arya dropped to one knee, listening carefully. She heard footsteps in the darkness, and angry voices. She pointed, their destination at hand. Thoros and Beric took out their weapons. The priest muttered a prayer to the Lord of Light, and the Lightning Lord ran a blade through his palm, cutting his hand open. Both swords burst into bright yellow flames. How did you do that? Arya couldn't stop from asking. Thoros used cheap swords and wildfire at King's Landing. Gendry said. The days of those shabby tricks are over. The Lord of Light has blessed me with true magic. Beric only gave a sad smile at Thoros' words, before the two charged ahead. Gendry followed, his warhammer at hand. Shouts of surprise and the clash of swords on shields rang out. Arya crept down the hall, pushing the barrel. Thoros and Beric had already brought down 3 men, but several soldiers still stood in front of a large open door, as wide across as 2 tall men. Arya could see even more free men in that room, some grabbing crossbows and spears. Arya gently cut a hole through the bung of the firkin and jabbed a cord, dipped in wax into the hole. She struck the flint against a lump of steel, until the sparks caught on the fuse. Out of the way! She yelled as she rushed the barrel down the corridor, the cord aflame. With one last push, she angled it through the door, and then ducked for cover. For a brief moment, nothing happened and then the pitch caught fire. The barrel exploded, engulfing the armory in flames. Desperate men scrambled out, only to be cut down by Thoros and Beric. Others ran away, and fell to Arya's blades and Gendry's hammer in the back. Screams could be heard in the room still, as the dark reddish fires blocked any exit. Black smoke billowed out and then there were no cries, only an inferno that consumed the weapons of the armory. Sweat dripped on her smiling face. Let's go. Arya said. Where to, my lady? the Lightning Lord asked, his sword now red with blood and not flames. The gatehouse. We are going to help Jon take the castle. Arya followed Balerion without looking back. Brian kept her shield up and sword ready as she strode down the hall, leading a bunch of Winterfell men. They had been assigned by Sir Alyn, who after spiking the eastern door, had moved to reinforce the western side. They were an odd bunch, but they were proud of their house, wearing a tabard of a grey dire wolf, with white eyes, over their silver mail. Some even had cloaks pinned with hands of beaten silver to commemorate Ned Stark's brief time as Hand of the King. "My lady, perhaps you should allow me to lead," a stocky clean-shaven man said. She did not have a good memory for names. Was this Hayhead or Porther? She knew he was not fat enough to be a Labelly or Fat Tom, and the unfortunately named Poxy Tim had scars on his face. "And why should I do that?" Brian replied. "Well, everyone knows that a Northman is worth 10 Southron swords earned." 4 Freys jumped out from behind a screen. 2 were armored, and likely had been on patrol duty. 1 had only a breastplate and shield, and the last wore a mail hauberk over a gambeson. Brian bull rushed, trusting in her steel shield and sturdy blue plate armor. She got past the first 2 men and sliced down, her blade severing the right arm of the third man near his shoulder. She slammed the shield into the hauberk, the rim clanging into the chin. A brutal slice later, and the 4th soldier was down, bleeding from a cut throat. The 2 armored men turned but hesitated, knowing that they could be easily flanked. In that moment, Brian thrust her sword into a cheek, the bloody point coming out the other side. The last man attempted to run, and Brian brought him down with a swift kick. She pulled out a thin poniard and plunged it through the back of the gorget. "Bloody hell, Harwin, she can really fight," Fat Tom said. "You were saying?" Brian said, wiping the sword and dagger on the stained gambeson. "We are glad to follow your leadership, my lady," the stocky man squeaked. "I am no lady," Brian said as she sheathed the poniard and took up the longsword. When they entered the dungeon, the jailer blanched, promptly threw down the keys and scurried away. Brian thought for a moment about pursuit but decided prisoners were more important than an old hunchbacked man. They found Mark Piper, Darren Hornwood, Lord Goodbrook, Little Ben Blackwood, and many others from the Riverlands. A tall man with a wine-stained birthmark stretching from cheek to neck took charge. "How did you find us?" Cale Vance asked. "The Lord helped some of the weaker captives to their feet. Snow. He took the bridge," Brian responded. There were 10 highborn prisoners and a dozen more squires and pages, but besides Hornwood, the Northmen were not here. Neither was Edmure Tully. "The bridge, not the castle." "But how?" Brian pursed her lips. "You will understand, Lord Vance, when you see the bridge. Edmure is in the other castle, so that Lord Walder and the free scum can gloat over him." Robert Peach said. "I hear many men coming," a fat Stark guard shouted. They beat a hasty retreat, Brian and Cale Vance holding the rear. The Riverlord looted a few shields and swords from the dead soldiers. And many of the prisoners had suffered poor treatment, even the young boys. She could hear the baying of hounds as they ran the corridor. At least a score of free men at arms pursued them, waving swords and spears. They made it past the doors onto the stone bridge. Stark guards defending the water tower marched east toward them, a forest of spear points down the center of the bridge. The Freys and their hounds rushed forward, only to stop in shock. A 6-foot spear whistled over Brian's head, skewering 3 soldiers through the torso. Quarrels, bolts, even rocks rained down on the enemy, and then another massive bolt nailed a hound through his head. The dogs whined and whimpered, and men ran, only to be shot in the back by arrows. Another giant spear whooshed through the air. The ballistas on the battlements ruled the bridge. The phalanx parted, allowing them to make their way west. The prisoners stared in wonder at the hive of activity. Stark men swarmed the crossing, and more guards formed rows of 8s with spears and shields to assault the castle. At the western riverbank, rafts landed against the last pier, and men scaled ropes and ladders to the bridge. But what surprised Brian was the action around the water tower. A dozen Wintertown boys were busy with nails and wood, hammering planks together into large flat sheets. Chet oversaw the pulley and windlass as those same sheets were being lowered down toward the river. On the tail of rafts that stretched from stone bridge to wooden bridge, small figures danced about, placing the wood decks down, and orders were shouted and relayed back and forth. "What are they doing?" Brian said, wondering. The freed rivermen gaped at the line of rafts bobbing together. "How did they build all this?" Cale Vance asked. "Wood, rope, pitch, nails and barrels. The Freys were kind enough to leave us the empty ale and wine barrels at Seven Streams," Chet said. "We must go to Lord Edmure's rescue," Sir Robert Peach said. "You will need armor and shields," Brian said. Chet pointed to a large pile of armor and weapons. "We stripped the bodies killed by our archers. Help yourself." The boy returned to his work, overseeing the little birds and his crew. Brian led the riverman, the Hornwood boy, and the half-dozen Winterfell men into the castle. Here, the fighting had been more intense. Bodies littered the hallways, and doors and windows had been smashed and broken beyond repair. Most of the dead were free men, but some were hapless servants caught in the crossfire. Many more small folk had surrendered and knelt on the ground, weeping and terrified. She found Sir Alyn in the Great Hall, a third of the way into the western castle. The twins were two formidable castles, built with extensive fortifications, walls and towers. None of them protected from an attack from inside. The Stark forces had cleared the rooms to the Great Hall, but there they met with strong resistance. "Sir Alyn, we have rescued the rivermen," Brian said. "Well met, sir." "What of Edmure Tully?" Cale Vance said. "The Freys are defending the staircases. They are fighting hard to prevent us from reaching them. Lord Tully is in a dungeon on a lower level," Alyn replied. "That staircase also leads up to the keep. Lord Walder Free sleeps there," Robert Peach said. "Aren't there other staircases down?" Brian asked. "There are, but Lady Arya set the armory on fire. The flames make it too difficult to reach the dungeons from the steps closer to the bridge." "Then we shall clear a path," Mark Piper said. He prepared to charge the shield wall. The Free Knights were densely packed, the kite shields overlapping. "Wait, sir. There must be a better way," Brian said. Charging a wall of shields held by trained men would be costly. In battles, such a formation was broken by cavalry, not infantry. At Riverrun, the Cricket Hall men made a last stand. Snow dropped a burning siege tower on their heads, and they surrendered. Cale Vance said. "We don't have siege towers here," Harwin said. That was an obvious and unhelpful comment. Brian looked around. In the Great Hall, there were many, many tables, a testament to the numbers and wealth of House Free. And if there were tables, then the benches, Brian said. "We can use them as a battering ram." The tables sat 10 men per side, and some of the oak benches were over 12 feet long, and light enough for 2 men to carry and run. "A bench will not kill a knight," Harwin said. "We do not need to kill them. If we drive them back, the soldiers will retreat up the stairs. And then we can reach the dungeon." The rivermen formed teams of 2 to 4. Sir Alyn ordered a quick volley of arrows, and then Brian and the others smashed into the shield wall. The benches, as long as a knight's lance, forced the Freys back. The path down was left unguarded. They hurled the makeshift rams forward, and then ran down the steps. The western dungeon had more guards, but they were poor fighters. Brian slew 2 men easily before the resistance crumbled and surrendered. Mark Piper and Cale Vance went first to their lord. A hempen noose dangled from Edmure's neck, and his feet and legs were filthy. The silver trout on the tunic was brown. The Great Yon roared when his cell was opened, and Willis Marndaly hugged Hornwood with fat, happy arms. There were others, as well, Lord Glover, Ricard Carstark, Robin Roger, Cleesa Wynne, Sir Helman Tallheart, and Patrek Mallister. The Great Yon and the other Northmen gathered over Daisy Mormont, shielding her body with theirs. Her clothes were torn and shredded. The breeches had been torn away and thrown carelessly through the prison bars. Her nose was broken and her right eye blackened. The right cheek was puffed and darkened, and there were scratches on the arms, chest and thighs. The bruises told a clear story about the horrors of war. "Lord Rob, how is he?" Daisy stood up, the dirty shift barely decent. She spoke through cracked, bloody lips. He is alive but hurt badly. Snow leads the attack on the castle. Brian said. My lady, can I offer you a cloak? Daisy shook her head as Clayserwyn handed over the breeches. She shook them out and put them on, covering the marks on her legs. Get me a sword, or better yet, a morning star. Lord Carstark swiped a sword from a cowering guard. He offered it to Daisy, who caressed the hilt like a newborn child. Then she stepped forth and hacked off the dungeon warden's neck. The fleshy fat head rolled on the stone floor. Lady Daisy, he surrendered.